This is Jocko Podcast number 218 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
In the Marine Corps in Vietnam, first and second lieutenants made up about 65% of the Marine officers killed in action. Now, if you add captains, Marine Corps captains, 03s onto that, you get to about 85% of all Marine officers killed in Vietnam were in these relatively junior ranking officers. These were the platoon and company commanders. And if you go to 1968 was the year with the highest number of Americans killed in action in Vietnam. 16,899. That's over 1,400 per month. 1,400 per month killed in action. Now, to put that in perspective a little bit, during the heaviest fighting when I was in Iraq, which was in 2006, there was 823 Americans killed. Now, obviously, every single loss is a tragedy. But during the Vietnam War, the tragedy was 20x that number. 20 times more people killed in 1968 in Vietnam than there were in Iraq in 2006. That is it's just a different level. Now, in total, in Vietnam, there were 14,836 Marines killed. 1,387 of those were officers. So that's basically 10% of the Marines killed were officers. And as I already said, 85% of them were these junior officers. Now, if you just run that math out a little bit, there's generally around going to be one officer in an infantry platoon. And there's going to be around 40 guys, which means that these officers make up for about 2.5% of Marines. And then, again, just by my estimation, just some rough math, that means that these young Marine officers were about 4 times more likely to be killed than the enlisted guys. And if you think about that, you wonder why is that? How's that happen? Well, from a tactical perspective, first of all, the enemy knows what I say all the time, and that is that leadership is the most important thing on the battlefield. And because of that, the enemy aims to kill the leaders. And then on top of that, Marine officers are trained to be the first one on the ground, the first one that's off the helicopter, the first one that's out of the vehicle, the first one in the combat situation, and then the last to leave, the last to load the helicopter, the last to get inside of an APC. So right there, your chances go up because you're in it longer. And that might only be an extra 30 seconds, but those moments when you're inserting, you're extracting from the battlefield, those are the most critically dangerous moments, usually. And then on top of all that, you add to the fact that as an officer, you generally lead from somewhere near the front of the patrol. Maybe you're behind the point man, maybe you're behind the point man and the first automatic weapons gunner. And since you're in the front of the patrol, well, that increases your exposure to booby traps. It increases your exposure to ambushes. And then, of course, on top of all those things, when the time comes, you actually have to lead. You actually have to step up. You actually have to make decisions. You actually have to get your men to maneuver on the battlefield. That's what your job is. And by the way, that job description is not just some theoretical job description. This is what the young Marine officers in Vietnam actually did. And here's an example of what a young Marine Corps officer did in Vietnam. The President of the United States of America takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star to Second Lieutenant Charles Robert Eisenbach, United States Marine Corps, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action while serving as platoon commander with Company D, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division, FMF, in connection with operations against the enemy in the Republic of Vietnam. On 4 July 1968, Second Lieutenant Eisenbach was leading a reconnaissance patrol when the unit suddenly came under intense small arms and automatic weapons fire from a numerically superior North Vietnamese army force, and the lead elements were pinned down. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he immediately directed the remainder of his men to maneuver to aid the beleaguered Marines, while he fearlessly moved forward to direct the fire of his men. Ignoring the enemy fire impacting around him, he moved about the fire-swept terrain, deploying his men into advantageous firing positions and directing their fire until he was seriously wounded. Although he was partially paralyzed and unable to move, he continued to direct his men while simultaneously adjusting airstrikes and supporting artillery fire upon the hostile positions. Disregarding his painful injury, he resolutely controlled his unit throughout the remainder of the firefight. His heroic and timely actions were an inspiration to all who observed him and contributed significantly to the accomplishment of his unit's mission. By his courage, superb leadership, and unwavering devotion to duty in the face of great personal danger, Second Lieutenant Eisenbach upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and of the United States Naval Service. Now, when you hear an award write-up like that, you kind of have to ask yourself, who are these men? Where did these men come from? Where did they learn this level of courage and bravery? And where did they learn to lead? Well, it is an honor to say that today we have one of those men with us. As a matter of fact, we have that man, the man whose Silver Star citation I just read. His name is Charles Robert Eisenbach, or Ike, as he was known. And he's here to share his story so that we can learn some of the lessons from him about leadership and about life. Ike, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Great to meet you. And luckily, your son and your daughter put together a bunch of information, kind of a timeline of your life, which made it really easy for me to prepare for this podcast, because that's normally what I have to go back and do. But Matt, appreciate you doing that.
Not a problem.
And it starts off where I always like to start off these podcasts, in the beginning. So, sir, let's talk about your childhood. Let's talk about what was young Ike doing? Where'd you come from?
Well, young Ike wasn't around, but young Bob was, or Bobby, because I was Bob or Bobby to the family before I went in the service. And about a week into the Naval Academy plebe summer, squad leader got us all out one night and gave us nicknames. Some stuck, some didn't. Ike stuck. So that's the way that was. But when Bobby was growing up, Bobby's dad was a career naval officer. And somewhere just to the right of Attila the Hun, I would say. He was a hard man. But we had an interesting childhood, moved every couple of years, back and forth the East Coast, West Coast, spent a couple of years in Lima, Peru, and ended up at Subic Bay in the Philippines, graduating from high school out there. So it was an interesting childhood.
So was he in World War II?
He was. He was a naval aviator. He, out of the Naval Academy class of 36, flew PBYs. As he used to say, flying used to be fun. You know, you'd put on the silk scarf, go up for 45 minutes or so, and he said, then somebody invented this damn PBY, which stayed aloft for 12 hours. And flying was not so much fun after that, but that's what he did in World War II. He was in the Olongapo in the Philippines when the war broke with his squadron, which I think was VP 101. They kind of got out just by the hair of their chinny chin chin, worked their way south down the Philippine Islands to Java, current day Indonesia, and ended up in Perth, Australia. From there, I think he came back to the U.S. for about a year and did whatever they did with folks in World War II back then. And went back, picked up command of a seaplane tender, the San Pablo, and worked his way back up the Pacific with MacArthur's group. I think it was at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, not as a combatant, because the seaplane tender isn't had 1 or 2 5-inch guns on it. They didn't go out there and shoot it up with anybody. But
we hope not.
No. Well, yeah, and they carried ab gas and ammunition, so that wouldn't have been a pretty picture. But, and after World War II, came back. He didn't see me until I was a year old, I guess. And I didn't know what I looked like because he said my mom's pictures were just nothing blur. So we just picked up the family from there, started moving. Sister was born a couple of years later after I was born in Arlington, Virginia. Like I said, we'd come back to Coronado once or twice.
Before the bridge. Before the bridge,
that's right. It was the ferry back then, and that was a big deal. Of course, when you're a little kid, ferries are fun. When you're a parent, I guess they're just a pain in the butt because you're trying to get back and forth to Coronado from San Diego on a time schedule.
And so, how long did he stay in for?
He was in for 26 years. Had a heart attack out in the Philippines, his last duty station, and back in the 60s, a heart attack was. You were just automatic medical retirement. So they shipped him back to Newport, and he was retired probably after about 27, 28 years.
How old were you at this point?
I was in first year of college at the University of Utah when he had his heart attack. I went into the Naval Academy the following year.
So when you were growing up, were you thinking about, obviously if you went to the University of Utah, did you want to go in the Navy at that point?
Well, my dad being my dad, he had prepped me for the Naval Academy. We had visited there when I was younger and everything like that. When I was about a junior in high school, he would start with, well, Bobby, what are you going to do after you graduate from high school? And, I didn't have a good answer. No answer was going to be just right. I knew what the answer should be. But eventually I started to say, well, Dad, I think I'm going to go to college. That kind of satisfied him for a few months, and then he came back and said, well, who do you think's going to pay for that? Well, that had me stumped for another couple of months. But finally, by the end of my junior year, I said, Dad, I think you're going to pay for it. And so that's kind of stopped that. So we get out to the Philippines, graduated from high school out there, had 17 in my graduating class, all-time high for George Dewey Senior High School. And I still, I wasn't going to go to the Naval Academy. That just wasn't in my scheme of things. So 3 of us got accepted to the University of Utah. I went to the University of Utah because it was the one school that accepted me out of high school. Not that I had bad grades or anything. I had decent grades and good recommendations, but that's just, the way things worked out in the early 60s. This was 62 when I graduated from high school. So 3 of us went off from my graduating class off to Salt Lake City and were enrolled as freshmen at the University of Utah. There was a get-together of all the freshmen before school officially started, and I don't know who was up there on the stage, but he was touting the diversity back then of their entering class. And so he'd have you stand up and he said, and we have 3 gentlemen here from the Philippines. Would you stand, please? So us 3 gringos kind of stood up, and people were looking at us like, "Who? You're from the Philippines?" Yeah. Well, yeah, technically we were. Which, leads me to what I thought at the time was quite a funny story. We, in Utah at the time, you couldn't get anything higher than a 3.2 beer. And you couldn't smoke unless you were older than 18, which you'd get tickets for if they caught you. They being the Salt Lake City police. But somehow we liberated some beer one night, and we had a guy in the dorm who had a car, so we went up to Canyon Road that evening and we're drinking beer up there, and next thing we know, there's a cop car right behind us, and a cop gets out and says, "All right, you guys, get out of the car." There was the 3 of us from the Philippines and a friend of ours whose dad was in the diplomatic corps. So he starts at one end and says, "Where are you from?" "Philippines, sir." Next kid, "Philippines." Me, "Philippines." And so he comes to the last kid, he says, "I suppose you're from the Philippines too?" And the kid says, "No, sir, I'm from Saudi Arabia." So he said, "Guys, if you go about half a mile up the road, we don't go that far up there." So meanwhile, we had dumped the beer and everything, so that was the deal in Salt Lake City.
And then at what point did you start thinking, I'm going to go to the Naval Academy instead of continuing with your career at the University of Utah?
My career at the University of Utah was fading fast, shall we say. I had joined NROTC and really enjoyed that, but the rest of academics really weren't my forte. About Christmas time, my parents were back in Newport, Rhode Island, so I caught a train back to there for Christmas, and that's when my dad and I had some serious talks about, what I was going to do. And I said, well, okay. I had to promise him that I would apply to the Naval Academy. And I wasn't, that keen on it, but, I got to keep Dad happy. Happy Dad, and he kept that $50 a month spending money coming, which typically was spent long before it arrived. So I applied to the Naval Academy, took the SAT one weekend, and did surprisingly well. And a couple of months later, I get this little envelope in the mail, and I'm thinking, gosh. Well, actually, it was a packet, I guess. It wasn't really just an envelope. And I was thinking, I was afraid to open it. My roommate said, if it was going to be, if it's a rejection letter, it's probably just a simple letter. And he said, you get a packet, you're probably in. So sure enough, I opened it up. I'd been accepted. Got a presidential appointment from JFK, and it went off. I had some interesting experiences as an NROTC kiddo at Utah, and one came from a senior enlisted Marine. There was a gunny, just an outstanding gent. And he couldn't do enough for you. He organized the little programs on the weekends where we go out and set up ambushes in the canyons up from Salt Lake, or up from the University of Utah, and it's really, so he kind of, I think that's where I got the idea that I wanted to be a Marine, from Gunny, whose name I can't remember. But
was he a World War II guy?
I don't think so. I think he was more of a Korean guy.
Oh, okay.
Just outstanding. He couldn't do enough for you, and he, in my speech class, I had to give a speech that used a prop, and so we had just had a class on the Thompson submachine gun. Now, you can't imagine doing it. You couldn't do this today.
No.
So I said, hey, Gunny, can I borrow the Thompson submachine gun, like on Tuesday for my speech class? It'll be gone for a couple of hours. And I had a guitar case from somebody on my floor in the dorm that I carried it in. So I I'm walking across campus with this guitar case with a Thompson submachine gun. Didn't think a thing of it, back then. This was fall of '62. Got to the speech class and said, kind of set the class up. I'm here to talk about, my whatever. I forget what word I used, but my weapon here, but my device here in the case. Of course, everybody thought it was going to be a guitar. It popped up with this Thompson submachine gun. The prof nearly keels over. So I gave him a little spiel. It was very well received, I must say. I think I got an A for the speech, but he gave me a pretty good tongue lashing about bringing such a thing to a classroom. Much
probably nervous to give you any other grade.
No, probably not. But it was fun.
So how long was it between when you got your acceptance letter and when you actually showed up for plebe summer?
I showed up for plebe summer on June 26th of 1963, and I probably got my acceptance letter in March, April, something like that.
And were you mentally prepared for plebe summer?
I believe I was, yes. In fact, I had pretty much come to all stop academically at Utah when I got the acceptance letter, because they had my first semester grades, and that was all they were going to evaluate. So I kind of ditched college for the next 4 or 5 months. There was a joke I heard later in the NROTC unit was later that they joked that the way to get in the Naval Academy was to flunk out of the University of Utah. But I did okay there. I struggled with academics at the Naval Academy, but I looked at it more as a leadership laboratory, I guess.
And then, so now it's 1963, you said, when you started there?
Yeah.
Are you guys even thinking about Vietnam at this point?
No, we're not. I can't even recall, hearing about Vietnam. At Utah, that fall, we had, heard and been not part of, but, the whole deal had been about the Cuban crisis. That was all the news that fall. We followed that pretty closely, but I don't think we had heard about Vietnam at all.
Yeah, things were not really escalated there at all yet.
No, not at that time.
It's no surprise. And you were you had some pretty notable people in your Naval Academy class.
Well, this is true. I became friends early on with a fellow who, at that time, went by Larry North. He now goes by Ollie. One of my friends in the class after that was Jim Webb. He was a boxer. I was a boxer. North was a boxer. A bunch of the guys I hung up with were boxers. We had a fellow named Ray Smith, who later on became a 2-star SEAL. I believe the first one to carry 2 stars. I'm not sure about that, but good guy, captain of the track team. Had Pete Pace in the class, first Marine to ever be chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 4 stars. Pretty heavy duty company.
Yeah, and then what about was Staubach with you guys too?
Staubach was in the class of '65. He was 2 years ahead of us. But our plebe year, the first year there, was the year he won the Heisman Trophy, which of course argued well for plebes, because after a football game, if you won, you'd have carry-on that weekend, and if you beat Army, you got carry-on, meaning you didn't have to brace up in the halls and chop around in the halls, and you didn't have to sit on the last couple inches of your chair in the mess hall.
And I know you got another guy that have got some information on a guy by the name of Tex.
Tex Harkins, a fellow from Texas, needless to say, was my roommate plebe summer and plebe year, one of several. Met him when I first came into the room with a sea bag full of gear that I now had to stencil. He'd been there a couple of hours, and he introduced himself as Maurice. Well, I did a double take, because I didn't think Maurice was going to fly, and sure enough, a couple of hours later, when I was worn out from hearing about how great things were in Texas, he became Tex. And Tex stuck. He's still Tex to this day. Good guy.
And there's some note about him trying to kill a firstie.
That wasn't Tex. That
okay.
was North. I stopped North going into this firsties room early morning when we had window closing detail in the winter. You'd have to go in and close the upper class windows. And he was headed off to this first class room with a bayonet. And he was going to do this guy in. This guy was horseshit beyond belief. I said, North, you can't do that. You'll get in serious trouble, buddy.
Yeah, you can't kill someone. You're going to get in serious trouble.
Right.
That's good advice right there.
Klebier was a little different back then, I think. Not quite the same anymore.
And then, so you talked about boxing, and were you a boxer before you showed up there?
Negative. No.
You just got into it when you were
I
there?
was not a particularly athletic young man, but boxing was something that most of everybody started out from ground zero with no experience. So that's kind of what I did plebe summer, and took it on to plebe year and boxed plebe year, some youngster year, which is sophomore year, and second class year, junior year. First class year, senior year, I was in academic trouble, shall we say. So I wasn't on the boxing team, but I did run the boxing sub-squad, where freshmen and sophomores ended up, if they failed boxing, as part of the PT curriculum, you'd have to go to a sub-squad. This was for every sport until you could, the leader of the sub-squad passed you, so you'd get a D. Because you couldn't have an F at the Naval Academy.
Did they make you, I know guys that I know that went to Naval Academy, they made them box for a semester, they made them wrestle for a semester, they made them do judo for a semester. Did they make you guys do wrestling and judo?
We did wrestling, boxing. We had some part of the PT curriculum was mandatory. You had 2 years of boxing lessons, 2 years of wrestling, 2 years of gymnastics.
Okay.
And 4 years of swimming, and they fed in all kinds of other things, like squash and golf and track. But first 2 years you had some mandatory things that you had to pass as part of the PT curriculum. Didn't have judo.
Well,
like
still, boxing and wrestling is an awesome base to have as a fighter. And then you throw judo in there, you're pretty good to go.
Yeah, we are.
And then what? I know you did some cornering for some of the guys, when they were boxing.
I did. It was my senior year, first class year, and North was in the finals, the boxing finals. You could win your Navy N, your letter, in boxing, even though it was not an intramural sport so much, but it was more of a club sport. But we didn't box against other institutions. They do now, but it was all within the brigade, and we'd have quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. And I was in North's corner the year he won his N, boxing against another well-known Naval Academy graduate, Jim Webb, who I think you've had on your program before.
Yeah, indeed.
And shall we say it was interesting. Webb had a lot of experience boxing. He'd boxed Golden Gloves, I believe, before he came to the Naval Academy, or at least city and county type boxing, state boxing, from wherever his dad was stationed at the time. But he and North they were two folks that were butt heads, I think, their entire careers, whenever they would run into each other, certainly at the Naval Academy and certainly when they were boxing. But it was an interesting night.
So this is a legit grudge match.
I think that probably would be fair to say.
And how'd it go down?
North won, much to everybody's surprise. North was the street fighter, and Webb was a more polished boxer.
Yeah, if you boxed certainly at the Golden Gloves level, even at like the county level, you're a really good boxer.
Yeah.
So that's a big achievement.
Well, somehow there's been, people have looked backwards, and that always comes up when you start talking about North and or Webb. Was the boxing match. Everybody knew it was a.
Did it go the distance?
It did. The distance being only 3 rounds, back then.
Yeah. Are they 2-minute rounds or 3-minute rounds? Because sometimes they have amateurs box 2-minute rounds.
I think they were 2-minute rounds. Yeah, they weren't
so
3.
6 minutes of fury.
Boy, I tell you, yeah. And I know wrestling can wipe you out in 5-6 minutes, but we were spent when at the end of a boxing match. You were spent because all you could do to just pull yourself out of the ring.
And what did you like for boxing for you, since you were new to boxing and you weren't much of an athlete before? What do you think you took away from boxing?
Well, don't quit. I went to the semifinals my junior year, got knocked out of the ring by that guy, by my opponent. Got back up, got back in the ring, took the standing 8 count, and finished the fight. And I know I met a Marine officer a year later when I was, on service selection night, when I was able to select the Marine Corps. And he said, gutsiest thing I've ever seen. Well, thank you, sir. But, I learned you don't quit. It ain't over until it's over, and it was over that night for me. But
and you mentioned from the gunny that you worked with at the University of Utah that you were thinking Marine Corps when you showed up at the Naval Academy. Did you stick with that the whole time?
I did. My dad being career Navy, I knew I could never fill his footsteps, and he was perplexed why I would want to go Marine Corps. He asked me straight out one time. I think it was a first year, a senior. He said, Bobby, what is it that Marine Corps second lieutenant has that a Navy ensign doesn't have? They got 3 hot meals a day, a nice bed with sheets to sleep in. So what is a Marine Corps second lieutenant got that a Navy ensign doesn't have? I looked at him and said, I think it's respect. Ooh,
Shots fired.
Shut the old man down.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely shots fired for sure.
And my grandpa was not somebody you would probably want to say that to. I don't know about at the time, though.
Well,
he was not the nicest guy.
He just was, like I said, a little to the right of Attila the Hun. And there was a couple of ways to do things. There was his way, and there was everybody else's. He took me out for dinner before I, got on the train to head off from the Naval Academy from Providence, Rhode Island, where I could catch the train back then. And he told me, Bobby, you graduate from the Naval Academy and I'll buy you the car of your choice. Oh, thank you, Dad. 4 years later, I'm getting close to graduation. I said, Dad, you remember when I left for the Naval Academy, you told me you'd buy me the car of my choice if I graduated? He looked at me and said, did you get it in writing? No.
And as the other thing that's unfolding is it's in 1963 when you show up there, hey, I'm going to be a Marine, but there's no war going on. Now we fast forward, it's 1967.
Yeah.
And Vietnam is now, Vietnam really started to escalate in like 1965, 1966, even more, 1967. You guys now know in the Marine Corps what you're signing up for. There's no mystery.
Oh, no. We knew precisely what we were signing up for. There was a board, I think this has been referenced in other places, in books and articles, a board of, those who've gone before us, those who've died, and it was starting to fill up with, pictures and names from Vietnam. So, yeah, we understood that. But, I'm sure being in combat yourself, that as you know, it's not going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Maybe the guy on the left or the right, but not you. You're bulletproof, at least in your own mind. And so, you worried about maybe getting maimed. In fact, I don't think we even worried about that. You worried about possibly getting killed, but then, hey, there's nothing after that. Your worries are done. And then your family picks up on it. Or you thought you might get a little, flea flicker wound or something like that and get a Purple Heart, but you never figured, you might come back without limbs or otherwise, markedly impaired. That just never entered your mind. I'm sure if it did, you would have been useless to your unit.
Yeah. The guys that are all going for the Marine option at the Academy, it's competitive, right? It's like it's hard to get that. Is it hard to get that Marine option coming out of the Academy?
Well, I can't speak for today, because today they'll have like 250, guys and gals going to the Marine Corps. In my day, and in the years in the 60s and before, there was a certain percentage of a class that could go Marine Corps. We had just about 900 guys in my class, and we had 86 slots. And they were divided in half they took half from the upper half of the class, grade-wise, and half from the lower. So you could get in the Marine Corps, say, and be in the middle of the lower half of your class, when a fellow who was in the lower part of the upper half of his class wouldn't have got selected, because those 43 slots were gone. And I got slot 86 when I went down for service selection night. I was sweating bullets, but I got it. In fact, a good friend of mine who was a couple of numbers behind me offered me $2,000 for my spot if I would give it up, because he wanted to go Marine Corps, and I knew how much he wanted to go to Marine Corps. I said, I can't do that. You know that? He said, yeah, I know that. But it was competitive in that respect. It was, academics played a big part in it.
Yeah, the Marine Corps does that with the way they give your jobs in the Marine Corps too, like coming out of the basic school. I know, like, they take like the class and break it up into thirds, and like the first, you pick your job. Mm-hmm. So you could be the number one guy, and if you get the number one guy, you can get your job, but you might be the top of the next third down, and you get your selection. Then the top of the last third, and you get your selection. So it's a way that they distribute the people, so that not every single the top of the class everyone goes infantry, and whatever job is at the bottom, we get a bunch of people that weren't the highest performers.
Right, exactly.
The Marine Corps is smart. It's about the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps.
Marine Corps understands that it's about the Marine Corps, because they haven't lasted this long without being able to put up a good fight, both in the nation's wars and back in the D.C. area when the time comes along for keeping the Marine Corps the Marine Corps.
And now, is your dad talking to you any more about looking at you and saying, hey, son, there's a war going on, and he's, obviously being in the Navy in World War II, he knows exactly what the Marine Corps does. And is he having any more talks to you and saying, hey, you might want to think about this a little bit more?
No, not a one. He kind of respected my decision, I guess, and just, let me go with it. Like I say, he's an interesting person. I got back to Bethesda after I was shot. I spent 12 months in Bethesda. He came to see me once, which for him was probably enough. And actually for me it was enough too. But I later on found out that he obviously was affected, by my being wounded. I kind of joked at him one day. One day we were out, barbecuing some hot dogs or something. And I said, Dad, you almost collected on my life insurance. He said, what are you talking about, Bobby? I said, well, Dad, you almost got that $10,000 of, servicemen's group life insurance from my demise in Vietnam. I said, don't talk like that. That was it.
That's the affection you got from the old man.
That was the understanding and the compassion that I got from Dad.
So you get done with the Naval Academy, you graduate, and now you're going to the basic school.
Right.
Do you remember what rank you were at the academy? How close to the bottom were you?
Oh, I think I was since on service selection night, went down in groups of 50, which is why I was sweating getting a place in the Marine Corps, because they could have all been gone by the time I got down there in the last group of 50. Because I was in the last group of 50.
Oh, there you go.
So,
answers that question. You weren't anchor man, so you didn't.
No, I wasn't.
You didn't collect any money.
I didn't get the dollar from everybody, but.
Is that what the last happens with the last guy?
That's right.
Allegedly, I've never confirmed, but the last person in the class gets $1 from every classmate.
Else,
Well,
so you can walk off with $600, $700, $800, $900.
the spot of distinction, I guess. Or not.
Well,
you still graduated, so I guess at that point it doesn't matter, and you got paid. So.
My class, we were kind of put out because our anchor man was a foreign national, I think from a country that didn't even have a Navy. So we were like, do we really want to fork over this buck for this guy? And of course we did, because it's a tradition. It's always been that way.
So you show up at TBS, and now it's 1968?
No. Graduated in June 7th of 67, and I put in for the first basic school class that was forming, which was the 1st of July. That was the beginning of the fiscal year back then, July 1st. So, I had a few weeks at home, boom, right back down to Quantico to start the basic school.
Okay, so you started in the summer, sometime in the summer of 67.
Right.
And then how well did the Naval Academy prepare you for the basic school?
I think pretty well. Of course, we didn't ever get into the tactical side of things at the Naval Academy for the Marine Corps, but you were in good shape. You obviously could wear your uniform, whichever it was, a Marine Corps or Navy uniform, well, because you've been doing it for the past 4 years. And I had gone to jump school on my summer leave between junior and senior year, and the physical requirements for that were pretty demanding. We got down to Fort Benning in August after cruise, and man, that baby is hot. That red clay in Georgia reflects that heat up, and you sweat.
They saw those midshipmen coming.
And of course, we'd be running around with Navy chairs, and any cadre fella, a staff sergeant or something, could pop up and halt us and drop us for push-ups and everything, which we loved. I don't think there were any UDT or SEAL groups going through when we went through, but they just ate the program up.
Yeah.
Needless to say.
I was one of the. Eventually, SEALs stopped going to airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia, and started running it in house.
Okay.
But yeah, I was lucky enough to go to airborne school, and yes, the instructors down there definitely appreciated our presence and let us know that.
Sure, they did.
And it's ridiculous too, because we're coming out of buds.
Right.
Literally a week or whatever. We travel across country, we show up there, so we're in really good shape. So there was really nothing that they could do to us that would hurt us, and we just would. And of course, that encouraged guys to be, wise asses, and I'm going to make you do push-ups. You can't make me do enough push-ups. So there's that whole thing going. And now that you're at TBS though, well, now you know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to go to Vietnam.
Right, regardless of your MOS that you came out with. Of course, I wanted to be an 03, and most of my friends did too.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So it's not actually guaranteed. So I'm thinking you still have to do a service selection inside or whatever, a job selection inside the Marine Corps.
Exactly. You put in for your top 3, and you hope you get number 1, of course, and most guys did. You're pretty savvy about your capabilities and your likes and dislikes by the time you get to TBS, I think, regardless of where you come from. We had a lot of recent ROTC grads, some recent OCS grads, and the Naval Academy grads, and you couldn't distinguish who came from what pipeline. We were all pretty motivated folks back then.
And I'm sure all the instructors must have been guys that were coming off of tours in Vietnam.
They were just back from their tours in Vietnam, and they were all captains or above. Yeah, very sharp guys. They didn't pick slackers, to be instructors at TBS.
And compared to the Naval Academy, was it just a totally different vibe of seriousness because they know exactly what they're preparing you guys for?
It sure was. You're out on problems. Daytime problems, nighttime problems, didn't matter when they ended. If you got back and turned in any gear you checked out at 3 a.m. in the morning, you're still up, at dark 30 the next morning. You didn't do that at the Naval Academy. You had study hour and stuff like that. But no, there was a definitely heightened level of seriousness at the basic school. Again, all the instructors were giving you straight poop, because they had just come back from there or recently back. My platoon commander, we had a platoon of about 50 guys. He was a captain, 2 silver stars, well decorated, big guy. They don't take, Marine Corps looks at you all kinds of ways. They look at how you did at basic school, your height versus your weight, some other obviously other factors before they assign you someplace. Like if you think you want to get to 8th and I and be part of that in Washington D.C., you've got to be like 6 feet or higher and taller or whatever, because they're sending the cream of their crop, because you're representing the United States Marine Corps in front of the public on a regular basis, and rightfully so. All the services do that. The guards at Arlington aren't 4'8" and sloppy. You know, they're all standing tall and looking good and very professional, needless to say.
How hard was it to, when you started picking your job? Obviously, you said you wanted to be an infantry platoon commander. Mm-hmm. How much competition was there for that? Well, did you have guys that were like, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that job. You can have it." Or was there competition for it?
I think there was only we didn't feel competition. You know, obviously you had to do well on the O course and all the different evolutions, and you had to pass the PRT, and you had to do well in land navigation, daytime, nighttime, do well on the rifle range and pistol range. But that was just part of the competition of TBS. You were always competing with your what do you call them?
Your classmates.
Your classmates at TBS. But a lot of guys wanted to go infantry, and obviously not everybody was going to go infantry. I don't know what the selection process was, but I had a good friend from the Naval Academy. Not really a good friend, but he was one kind of guy that would go around and say, "Are you going to go infantry too?" Also, meaning also, and of course you had no idea. It depends on what the Marine Corps, what their selection process was and whether you made it or not. And he ended up not getting infantry, which was probably a good move for him and the Corps.
Is there anything that you had struggles with when you were going through the basic school?
Oh, other than maybe, the O course or something like that. But that was just an 8-minute struggle. And as long as you were doing the best you could, that they didn't beat you up too hard or mark you down. But no, I didn't really feel that there was anything that was going to hold me back.
And they're training you with all the tactics, small unit tactics, naval gunfire, calling for fire. All there. Were you feeling like you were getting good preparation for the battlefield?
I did. What the basic school does is teach you everything you need to know as a company level officer. From your time as a second lieutenant up to captain. After that, there's another school. I'm not sure what it's called, but for senior captains and new majors. But I felt well prepared. They had a Vietnam village built up in Quantico, staffed, of course, by Vietnamese. Duh. And you practiced that. You did helicopter operations. You did walk-in insertions. You did land navigation, daytime and night, which I'm sure you know is a horse of a different color.
It is indeed.
But I apparently was pretty proficient. I graduated 7th in the class, not first like Webb did in his class, but that's okay. 7 was good enough for a letter of commendation coming out of the basic school. So.
And that's 7 out of class of how many?
About 240 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like you were better at the field craft than you were at the academics.
Well, this is true. In fact, I got shot in the head, and I have classmates who said, who still say to this day, we think that made you smarter, because I did go on to graduate school and get a master's and a PhD, after I was retired out of the Marine Corps. And maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
So then, so the basic school is what, 6 months long?
About 5.5 then. Yeah, they were shortening it up.
5.5 months long. You get done with the basic school. You get infantry.
Right.
And then what happens?
I got selected for reconnaissance replacement training, which was a couple of weeks in Southern California, a week at Pendleton. Again, for more supporting arms training in artillery, that sort of thing, air. And then a week at Coronado for learning about naval gunfire support.
Did you use the board? What do they call that? The smoke board? Did they have the little fake terrain set up that you could call for fire on? I went to the Marine Corps Naval Gunfire School, and they had this terrain board, and it was kind of like it must have been built in like 1975. And when you'd call for fire, if you got in the right spot, little smoke would come up through that spot. And it was like you were looking at, through binoculars somewhere. It was pretty good.
No, I never saw anything like that. We were actually firing real live artillery at Pendleton. And at the Naval Gunfire Support School, we had this big board, but it was blue. It was ships in the ocean per se. But that was interesting because I did one night get to fire the cruiser Providence in Vietnam, which was fun. You know, they couldn't use their 6-inch guns because they're too flat, so they used their 5-inch. You know, bringing indirect fire on. We had a bunch of lights below us. I think folks were trying to move their troops around in the middle of the night, but and we, you know, this was on call for us, so we used it.
So you got to use the naval gunfire.
I did.
That is like a dream of mine ever since I sat there on that little terrain board.
Well, it was a dream of ours, and you know, I got to use my Bravo Zulu term at the end of it to thank them for their fire.
Bravo Zulu, the real Bravo Zulu.
The real Bravo Zulu, yeah.
That is outstanding. That is outstanding. I never even got close to even remotely thinking about calling for naval gunfire for real. So
I probably weren't too close to big waterways.
Yeah. And I don't know. There's always that thing where guys want to fire a bunch of different weapons.
True.
In combat, right? And I had one guy get shot in the chest, but it hit him in the chest plate.
Uh-huh.
So I wasn't with him, but they actually had video of this. So he gets shot in the chest plate, and so he's all mad. He's mad, and he shoots a bunch of machine gun rounds, and someone goes, "Hey, shoot your pistol at him too." And he looks at him like, "Why?" What? And he says, "Well, it'll make you feel better." So he pulls his pistol out and shoots that too. And I'm sure if he would have had naval gunfire, who knows? Maybe he would have gone for it.
I don't know about the pistol. When we fired the 45 for qualification down at TBS, I think our instructor actually told us, in combat, if this is all you've got, you're probably just better off throwing the pistol at him than shooting at him, because you have a better chance of hitting him, the bad guy on the other end.
Did you guys not have infantry officer course back then? Because that's like a multi-month course now after TBS. We
did not. No, you're considered good to go, after graduation on TBS. Yeah, no, now they have a 10-week officer or infantry officer training course, which I think would have been outstanding, but we had what we had.
Mm-hmm. So you go to this recon course,
mm-hmm.
and so now are you getting jump pay and all that stuff now?
No, even though I was jump qualified, if you're not in a unit that maintains your jump qualification in the Corps, you don't get jump pay. In fact, we got to Vietnam in 1st Recon Battalion. There was only one company that maintained their jump status. That was Charlie Company, and they were the Force Recon Company. They did the same thing as the battalion recon companies did, but they did maintain their jump status. And so they got jump pay and extra $75 a month, which was a big deal back then.
So you end up going through this recon training, and then what happens? Then is it time to deploy to Vietnam?
It's time to get on a bus and head up to Air Force Base in San Bernardino. Don't know the name of it, but flew over to Okinawa. Spent a week there, so they kind of dribbled you in.
Are you with all different branches of servicemen, or are you just with Marines at this point?
Just with Marines at this point. Going over. Flew on Saturn Airlines, I believe. A non-sched airline to Okinawa.
Oh, just like civilian. Was there civilian? What are they called? Hostesses, stewardesses on there?
Stewardesses. Oh yeah. A few stews.
Flight attendants.
But typically, you wouldn't have anything to do in Okinawa while you waited for your assignment to be flown into country. But when we got to Okinawa, there was about 5 of us that were traveling together. We had been to the recon replacement training together, and we were just milling around the receiving area after we got off the plane, and somehow I got up above it, higher up than the crowd below me, and I'm watching, and there's this young Lance Corporal with a clipboard. He's going to each of the second lieutenants that I had, my buddies, and asking them some question, and they're going, no. So I said, this poor kid, I've been in this position before, so I'll find out what's going on. So he what he needed, his company gunny or something had sent him down. He needed a signature from an officer to run 3 plane loads of Marines through a little program on Okinawa where you FAM fired the M16, because none of us had ever seen an M16, much less fired one before we went into Vietnam. And so you'd FAM fire, familiarize yourself, fire the M16 before you went in country, made sure all your shots were up to date and all your paperwork was up to date. So I said, sure, so I signed for him. I'd have to get up every other night while I was there for about a week, meet an incoming plane at about 2 a.m. in the morning, find the senior enlisted guy on the plane, form these guys up, take them over to a barracks, had them draw a mattress, flop down, told them to be, had to be out next morning at 7:30 in the morning and go to chow, and then we start them through the little program that you had to go through before you could get in country. So I met my 3 planes in a little more than a week's time. I was desperately afraid my officer buddies were going to rotate into country before I did. Didn't happen. We all went off together. But anyway, it was an interesting week.
What did you shoot in the basic school, the M14?
M14,
And how'd you feel about the M16 when you got it?
I loved it. Lightweight, ammo's lightweight. Unfortunately, most Marines in Vietnam found out they had pitted barrels. And sure enough, I had to trade mine in, a month or 2 after I got there for one that was a newer one with a good barrel in it.
That's crazy. You guys didn't even didn't even shoot that weapon until you got to Okinawa.
That's right.
And then was the other training course they were giving you like basic preparation for Vietnam, jungle navigation or something like that, or
in Okinawa?
Yeah.
No, you were just kind of on your own until you rotated in. Khe Sanh was getting hot then, so we used to go to some 3 shack, operations shack of some outfit on Okinawa and hear the morning brief about Khe Sanh and kind of look at each other and think, "Geez, do you want to get sent there?" No. No.
So then you spend that, what is it, a week in Okinawa?
About
and now you guys all fly over to Vietnam.
Right.
And where do you fly into?
Da Nang.
And then when you get there, what's that process like?
That process, we get there in the evening, it's dark. Again, somebody met you took you off somewhere, you grabbed a mattress, flopped you down in some barracks at the end of the runway, and you slept until the next morning with all this F-force taken off above you. No sleep.
Did you have that stereotypical moment that people talk about, which is, the guys that are going home, the guys that are rotating home after their year, and you see the contrast between the new guys showing up with their brand new gear and the old guys that are heading home and they look like they've been through hell and back?
No, never saw anybody that was going home, down at the Nang airfield. Didn't see them. Mm-hmm. We arrived sometime in the middle of the night and it was dark and we had no, you have that little kind of internal feeling of impending doom or dread or something. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's just your adrenaline pumping, that you're finally going to get in country. And, what's going to, are you going to take incoming rounds while you're landing? No. The answer is no. It's a normal landing. You get off the aircraft, somebody meets you. Officers this way, enlisted guys that way. Drew your mattress, tried to sleep for the rest of the night.
Do you know where you're heading at this point?
You knew the division you were going to, 1st or 3rd. 3rd was up north, in North I Corps. 1st was down around the Da Nang area. And I was going to the 1st Division. You didn't even know if you were going to get to the recon battalion. You went to division. The next day we went to division. We got introduced to the commanding general for some reason. And we were required to sit down. He gave us a big book, Rules of Engagement. You had to read that, sign that you'd read it and understood it, and then you got sent off to your unit. And about 3 of us were lucky enough to go to the reconnaissance battalion. The other 2, they went off to regular grunt units, infantry units.
So when you get assigned to recon, and then do you guys drive up there? Do you take a helicopter up there? How do you get up to your actual unit?
The actual unit, 1st Recon Battalion, was located just below and across the street from division headquarters.
Oh, so it was easy.
So you walk down there. And as I said before, we had the one company, Charlie Company, that wasn't with the battalion in Da Nang. It was forward based at Phu Bai. They're the ones that kept up their jump status. And one of my buds, who had gone through the recon replacement training, I was slated to go up there because I was single, up to the Force Reconnaissance Company. And he asked if I would mind giving that position to him, if it was okay with the colonel, because he was married and expecting their first kiddo and needed that extra $75. I was just happy to be there. I said, sure, take it if that's what you want. That's no big deal. So he went up to the Force Company in Phu Bai. I stayed there with the battalion in Da Nang.
And then what's the what was checking in like? I mean, you're showing up there, you're a new guy. These guys have been in country, and this is something that always surprised me about Vietnam, is that you guys would rotate. Just one individual
right.
replacements.
Right. Yeah,
Whereas for me, all my deployments were
unit.
The whole unit is going in and the whole unit's leaving,
right.
and so that's got to be a weird thing showing up as a new guy, and there's a bunch of people that have been there for between 2 days and 360 whatever days.
Right, you are. I mean, my working premise when I got to Vietnam was that anybody who was there a day longer than I'd been there, was a day smarter about the situation, a day more experienced, and by God, I was going to listen to this person, But interesting enough, my platoon wasn't even there. They were aboard ship with the afloat battalion. The Marine Corps always kept a battalion afloat off the coast of Vietnam that could jump into an operation, at a moment's notice, give or take. And they always had a reconnaissance platoon with them, and they apparently used them pretty much as point for the battalion, so that was not a plum job. But my platoon, with its outgoing platoon commander, was aboard ship, so I didn't see them for 2 weeks. I had nothing to do except I got tasked to sit on court martials, and I had unit grades, quarterly grades or something like that were due. I had to go through all my guys' service record books and give them a grade for their performance over the last quarter without knowing them, without having seen them. And this was going to be used for promotions. So I did the best I could. I took in the service record book how long the guy had been in the Corps, in country, had he been wounded, what was his level of education. I assigned him a few points, and then like 1 to 10, and then I added everybody's points up, and I had a grade to give him and recommended the top 3 for promotion or something like that. It was crazy, but I had to do it. It's what you did.
We were just complimenting the brilliance of the Marine Corps, and then you got to tell a story like that. Then did you eventually get flown out to the ship to be with them, or did they come back?
No, they came back.
They rotated back?
They rotated back. They were just filthy dirty. I think they came right from the bush. And the lieutenant, I got to talk to for about 10 minutes because he was like overdue to rotate out of country. So he just wanted to get a shower, get on a uniform, and get back down to Da Nang and fly out.
What pearls of wisdom did he give you in those 10 minutes?
He told me who the best guys in the platoon were and who he thought I might want to keep my eye on, and that was about it.
No tactical advice on anything?
No tactical advice on anything, no.
Well, it's interesting. I always say that leadership is the most important thing, and what he was trying to give you is a heads up on who's the best guys, and from a leadership perspective. That's interesting.
He just wanted out.
And then he just wanted to get out.
But I was in a hooch, with other lieutenants, second, first lieutenants who'd been there, anywhere from maybe 2 months to 4 months, and they were filling me in on how the deal operated.
Was there anything that surprised you that you were hearing from those guys? Anything that you said, "Oh, I didn't really expect that"?
Only thing that really surprised me, I think, once I got into recon and got working with them, was that occasionally you had to go out far enough that you weren't under anybody's artillery fan. You weren't rarely were we under the 105 fan and the 155 fan usually, and then there was Army 175s, which were very scary things because the word was they could bump out a click when they fired these things. They were big. We flew over them one time, and I looked at them. I swear they drooped. 175 artillery bases. They were huge. I swear they drooped. And then, of course, if you were out past the 175 fan, you had nothing but air to call on. And that took about 20 minutes to get there. And pilots never really trusted ground officers to, to bring them in correctly. So they'd always want to fly out an aerial observer, in one of these little Spitkit planes, propeller in the back. And I don't know what they were, OV-10s, I think. But that was kind of surprising but the artillery over there was fantastic. Great, they were on call 24/7, obviously. Best thing I ever fired was a Marine Corps self-propelled 8-inch. They were looked like a big tank with an 8-inch, fired an 8-inch shell. Boy, they were accurate to the nth degree, unbelievable. But basically, artillery was excellent over there. Saved our bacon many a time.
So when it's been 2 weeks, your guys get back, you take over as platoon commander.
Right.
What's your intro meeting with the guys in the platoon? What did you say to them?
Just kind of introduced myself. Probably told them the same thing I just told you. If you've been here one day longer than I have, and you got a better idea, or think you do, talk to me. I'm here to listen. I want you all to get back home, obviously, intact and not tacked in, as we used to say. In fact, the 5.5 months I was a platoon commander, we only took one serious casualty, and that was me. And I wouldn't have it any other way. We were extremely lucky, but we were also pretty good, We didn't do dumb things. There were folks who would harbor at night near a trail and hope bad guys would come down it just so they could try to set up a hasty ambush. No. Once your troops knew that you were serious about their welfare, we would have done anything for you. And of course, you'd do anything for them. I had 23 Marines in my platoon, maybe a couple of corpsmen. They rotated in and out according to the will of the battalion aid station. The finest young men ever assembled. I know most platoon commanders say the same thing, but these kids were average age 19, average education 9th grade, but they were top, they were primo. If I'd have told them that we've been tasked to fly up to Hanoi, drop in with a river raft and paddle up and free the folks out of the Hilton, they'd have been right there. They were just great kids.
What was kind of normal? Well, first of all, what was your first operation that you went on with these guys?
Well, first thing that I did was turn out to be a TET 1968 broke on my first snap-in patrol. They tried to get you on a snap-in patrol or two before you started leading your guys, so you'd know you were just you're just there to observe and learn. And your patrol leader might be an E3. In my case, it was an E5, Sergeant E5. And we got up this ridge line, and after crossing this path that looked like the I-5 of people paths in Vietnam, it was smooth, and we got up in a bad bunch of brush and some rocks, and we were looking up the ridge line, and pretty soon four NVA come tootling down this highway. So 4, and then there was 8, then there was 16. 32, 60. We stopped counting.
And this is your first mission?
This is the first. Yes, exactly.
And is this your platoon?
No, I was with somebody.
You're just tagging along with someone else?
I'm just tagging along, yeah.
And the platoon leader's an E5?
Well, yeah, the patrol leader was an E5.
The patrol leader's an E5.
Great young man. And so his rule of thumb was where there's 4, there's more. Because when we saw these 4 guys come out of the jungle down this ridge line, first thing was, let's go set up an ambush. No, Sergeant said, no. Where there's 4, there's more. We stopped counting at 400. And by now, we had artillery coming in. We had air on the way. We had an aerial observer up there. We fired artillery all day, all afternoon, into the night, into the evening. We had a Puff the Magic Dragon dropping flares with jets coming in underneath it, dropping napalm at night. Oh, it was unbelievable.
And this was your first night. Were you doing the call for fire?
No, it was Sergeant.
The Sergeant
was doing it, yeah. Yeah, I was there to learn, and to the pucker factor was like this. Guys would go on 1 or 2 snap-in patrols and never see anything, but And they
Welcome to Vietnam.
Yeah, and they maybe had a little too laissez-faire attitude, but this was my welcome to Vietnam, and I thought it was great. I mean, we were dropping artillery on these guys. They're running down the path toward our position, and they're in the brush. They're not on the path, but they're in the brush. We had rocks on, like our north side and or east side and west side. East side and south side. West and north, we just had brush. And there's, North Vietnamese, they're in the brush coming toward us. They're crying, they're screaming, they're yelling for mom, whatever you do if you're a North Vietnamese soldier. And they were gonna run right into us. So the sergeant brings in artillery behind us, real close, danger close. So we got shrapnel flying over our heads. And of course, this dissuades these bad guys from coming toward us. Also, we had a kid sat up when he should have been laying flat like a mushu pancake, took a piece of shrapnel right into his face and knocked out a few teeth and cut open his lip and everything. And the shrapnel was dropping down, and it burned right through your utility shirt, burn your skin. You just endured it. It was a little hairy. Yeah.
So danger close rounds coming your first night out in Vietnam. Dang.
Oh well, welcome to the war.
And you guys maintained your clandestine position the whole time.
Oh yeah.
How many guys were out there with you?
Probably about 10, 11. That was a heavy patrol.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So now, at how many of those snap-in patrols did you do?
2.
What was the next one like?
Next one wasn't that interesting from a tactical point of view, but it was going to be led by a lieutenant who had got a little tanked up at the O Club the night before, hadn't given the patrol a patrol order. So we're down there waiting on the LZ, waiting for the insert helicopters to get ready to take us off. Come down the hill was the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel. He comes over to our patrol, points to the lieutenant, says, get back up, pack your gear. You're going to the grunts, Boom, he was out. Colonel says to me and his Lance Corporal, Assistant Patroller, you think you guys can run the patrol? Yes, sir, no problem. So we did. It was great. But, shit can, this guy is just right there on the spot. And you could do that in recon. I had to do it once to one of my guys.
What'd the guy do that raided you, firing him on the spot?
I had, my patrol was like cut in half. My platoon was cut in half. I led half of it, anywhere from 8 to 10 guys, depending on who was not on R&R, who wasn't sick, that sort of thing. And my platoon, I had a platoon sergeant, E6 staff sergeant. He ran the other platoon. We flip-flopped about halfway through my tour. I was about 5.5 months. And so, the guys that I led, our code name was West Orange. We had an excellent reputation in the battalion. They were fast day. They felt like they were kind of distant cousins in the platoon, but I gave a pep talk that night with the patrol order. So, you guys are just like West Orange, no different. Again, 9th grade education, same age, same skills. And so I went through my little spiel, and my reputation. I'm a platoon commander, administratively or stuff, you know how I operate. So anybody doesn't want to go with fast day now? One kid raises his hand. I said, okay, you don't have to go. Pack your gear, get out of here. You're not sleeping tonight with these guys, And I don't know whatever happened to him, because I never came back from that patrol, but I'm sure it was taken care of.
So when you start getting into, what was the kind of typical mission that you guys were doing?
Typical mission was, we'd go out on a 6-7 day patrol. We're just snooping and pooping. That's what we called it. Mm-hmm. Finding trails that the enemy would use, base camps.
Would you guys insert on helicopter, or would you guys just foot patrol?
No, always helicopter, Always helicopter.
So you pick out a spot and get dropped off, and then what was your SOPs once you guys got inserted?
We got off the helicopter. Hopefully it was where the insert LZ was where, the operations officer or the operations shack said it was. Sometimes it wasn't there, but, that's why, as a patrol leader, first thing I did when I got on the helicopter was dump my gear, get out my little map, and insert myself between the pilot and the co-pilot, because if you didn't know where you were when you started a patrol, you weren't going to know where you were for the next 6-7 days.
Would you guys insert in the daytime, in the nighttime, in the pre-dawn, in the dusk? When would you guys go in?
We'd go in daytime. We'd be down on the LZ waiting, by about 8 o'clock in the morning. Birds would come in if they weren't being used for medevacs and stuff on some operation that was going on. About mid-morning, they'd go up and get a brief from the intelligence folks at First Recon. We'd be sitting around there, and then they'd come back down from their brief. We'd pop on the aircraft, and off we'd go.
So like midday, you're getting inserted?
Midday, yeah. That was pretty much probably about
generally
usual, yeah.
You hit and then what? You hit the ground, and what would you guys do as soon as you hit the ground? What was your standard operating procedures?
Our SOP was to DD and get out of that LZ as fast as we can. Nothing says Marines are coming in here than a bunch of helicopters coming in to land.
What would you be on, two Hueys?
No, we'd be on 246s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Army had Hueys, to transport troops. Marine Corps didn't. Anytime in the Marine Corps, they probably had about 60 helicopters in Vietnam. On any given day, about half of them would be airworthy. Sheesh. So we had Huey gunships. Hueys, I guess, carry the brass around, but we didn't use them as troop transport. We were all 46s. So
big old 46s.
Big old noisy 46s.
And then would you guys just, like, we always used to do something which was sit, look, and listen. So like we would, go 200 or 300 yards away from the LZ, and then we'd all just stop and just listen.
Get down, yeah. Pretty much the same way, yeah.
And then would you guys have different areas where you were headed to specifically?
We did. We had a patrol route that was pre-planned and an extract point that was pre-planned. Now, patrols rarely went, according to the pre-planning, which the operations shack did. We didn't do that.
So they were actually telling you where you were going to go?
Where we were going to go in at. But they had a recommended patrol route, which we'd stick to if we could. Couldn't all the time. And then we get out at this point where they had recommended. And again, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't.
What was how often would you guys be contacted by the enemy?
It wasn't all that frequently, because we were good. We snooped and pooped with the best.
Your purpose of being there was to not be
right.
discovered.
In recon, your job wasn't to find them, fix them, and foxtrot them. you didn't get online with 9 or 10 guys, or 11 maybe, and say charge. Your idea was to gather information, but if the situation was to your advantage, you could if the leader felt that it was worth the effort, set up an ambush. But normally we'd bring artillery on if we saw groups, and I probably ran 21 patrols, and I'd say probably good 3/4 of them we had fire missions on top of bad guys.
Oh, that's a high percentage.
Well, it wasn't anything like I think what you went through when you were in Ramadi.
Well, there was some of my guys in Ramadi that would get contacted a lot. There was one group over in Eastern Ramadi, and they did. I was actually briefing the Siege commander, who's the colonel that was in charge of all special operations, and I said, sir, my group that's 6 SEALs that are over in Eastern Ramadi, I said they've been in enemy contact 23 straight operations, and I'm not kidding. I didn't plan this for dramatic effect, but my intel officer who's running the Tactical Operations Center comes walking in and says, "Hey sir, just want to let you know that the guys out east are in contact right now." And I looked at the colonel and I said, "Make that 24 missions in a row." So there was definitely some hot areas. Yeah, it was pretty much expected if you were going out in Ramadi that you were going to get contacted by the enemy, and I don't know what the percentage was, but it was a vast. It was very rare that my guys would come back and hadn't shot their guns. Right, right. Very rare. Yeah, but 75. But I also, what was interesting when I came home from that deployment and would talk to some of the Vietnam guys, depending on the platoon, depending on the SEAL platoon in Vietnam, there's guys that shot their weapons on a 6-month deployment, shot their weapons 3 times, 4 times.
Yeah.
And there's other platoons in Vietnam where they shot their weapons 100%
Every
of the
time when
times.
they went, yeah.
So it all depended on. And my first deployment to Iraq, I think I shot my gun. We got in like 4 or 5 firefights. So really not that big of a deal. And then in Ramadi, the numbers just very high for as far as the whole task unit getting into big gunfights. But 3/4 of the time, that's a lot of fire missions.
Well, but they weren't gunfights per se. They'd be you eyeballing somebody or some place or some trail crossing or some little village you might come across in the middle of nowhere. One time we came across a cornfield in the middle of the jungle. I mean, it wasn't jungle per se because there was no high tree canopy over it, but it was just a field, a clearing in the middle of the jungle with rows of corn. Ooh, this is not your typical jungle plant, So we'd get up a little higher ground and we'd watch to see if anybody came in there and settled down. There was a few hooches there too.
Whereabouts were you guys operating in Vietnam?
We are operating north, south, and west of Da Nang. First reconnaissance battalion's mission was to patrol the rocket belt around the airport at Da Nang, but that wasn't particularly that far out, so we ended up a lot further out looking for main line NVA forces, and or where they camped out, the trails they used, et cetera, et cetera. But gunfights were relatively rare, which is a good thing. Because you can't see anybody in the jungle anyway. You're typically just firing blind. So that was one of the nice things about the M16. It would put out a lot of fire for you. And that's what you needed over there. You didn't need a heavy bullet necessarily to knock guys down. But the 7.62 or 5 point whatever was just fine. Now, when a 7.62, that was the big heavy bullet.
Yeah, that's the M14.
Yeah.
When you would get these mission taskings kind of from above from the battalion,
right?
They'd give it to you. Then how long would the planning cycle take for you guys to come up with a plan and do your briefing and all that?
About 24 hours. Yeah, it wasn't hardcore boilerplate, nowhere near the detail that I know that you all went through in Ramadi, but it was just, we were out 6-7 days back 2 or 3, so that was a regular schedule. You knew. I mean, the kids were all ready. The Marines were all ready. Their weapons were clean. If we had done things that we needed to do administratively, like go down to the gas tent and check all the gas maps and stuff, that had all been done on kind of the 24 hours in between.
Were you carrying the radio as the officer?
I had a radio man. Primary radio man was right behind me, and we had a secondary radio man toward the end of the patrol.
And you're taking what, 7, 8 guys, 10 guys, something like that?
10 guys. I usually went heavy,
So you got 10 guys. How many damn batteries did you have to carry for an 8-day patrol? Or would you get resupplied? Because were you using the 77, the Prick 77 radio? Or were you using one prior to that?
We were on prior, I guess, Prick 25.
The Prick 25.
Yeah.
There you go.
Not necessarily the best thing, but it was pretty good.
Yeah.
As long as you were line of sight.
Yeah. But I mean, you must have had to carry a lot of batteries for that thing.
We didn't. I mean, I guess the radio man had extra batteries, but we didn't typically, go through that much battery.
Man, I was a radio man, and it was ridiculous the amount of batteries in the early days because we got much smaller radios later on. And then how about water? Would you guys just refill canteens on rivers and whatnot?
We would if we could find water, but we went out with 8 to 10 canteens because you didn't know whether you were going to find water. And if you found it, you didn't know whether it was going to be potable or not. But we were typically often, I say, more often than not, in the mountainous type area, mountainous being, 1,000 meters or higher. And if we came across running water that, was moving along, I thought it was fine, safe to drink. Until I went to this little one-day school put on by a chief corpsman who talked about how the leech larva could be expelled into the water and just bubbled down with the water. Yes, after that, iodine tablets every time we refill. So never had any problems.
How about food?
Food, we had Korean era sea rats.
Did you say Korean air?
Korean era.
Oh, Korean era.
Yeah. 1954 it would say on there. Just plain sea rats in cans. MRAs were brand new when I was there, and we occasionally, on 2 patrols, I think that we managed to steal some MRIs from somebody in the Army.
Fine dining.
Yeah.
But see, they used water, so they were a better meal, but they would use water. So it was 6 to 1, half a dozen to another.
Would you guys patrol during the day and then lay up at night?
That's affirmative. Yeah, we'd find the nastiest, meanest vegetation at night and crawl in there and harbor. It'd be in a harbor site.
Did they use dogs to try and find you?
Nope, never saw a dog in Vietnam, or in the jungle anyway.
Yeah.
Apparently, Recon had taken out dogs and handlers in the early days, and the dogs just couldn't handle the heat and the terrain. So the handler would end up carrying the dog out. So that was a... Would you guys bring claymores to set up around your perimeter? We did. We bought claymores, and sometimes little anti-personnel mines, which sounded like a great idea until the next morning when the guy who'd put them out...
Got to go retrieve them.
Yeah, you got to go retrieve them. Maybe he had 6 mines out, and he came back with 5. Oh! So we would be moving out in the opposite direction. Claymore was a good weapon, though.
And so it sounds like your op tempo was like, go on a patrol, you're out there for 6-7 days, you come back, you rest, you refit, you spend 3-4 days in camp, something like that.
2 or 3 maybe.
2 or 3.
Yeah. It was a pretty quick turnaround. You didn't have time to settle in and get comfortable anywhere.
And then it's back out. Were you guys just skinny as could be?
We were. I went over there weighing 155 pounds, which was my weight at the Naval Academy. Came back, I was 123 when I got back. But part of that was the previous 19 days or something after I was shot till I got back in the States. I didn't eat too much. I was being fed for one thing, and most of the time it was red Jello, and that wasn't real appealing. I couldn't look at red Jello for about 5 years after that.
Did you guys have any night vision at all? Like a starlight scope?
Yeah, we had fixed positions that we would go to for sometimes longer, as much as 2 weeks, and they were essentially high points, like a hill, 800-meter high hill, and they'd have a permanent radio. We have a permanent radio relay station on there, and patrols would just rotate there every couple of weeks to provide security for that guy, because he was up there for like 3+ months, and on those we had starlight, and we'd watch the valleys and stuff below us, but never used them that much, no.
Going out in the field that much, you guys must have really been, you guys must have been really good and really efficient out in the field after doing it field op after field op after field op for 6, 7, 8 days every time. Did you feel like you guys were kind of part of the jungle at that point?
Never felt really part of the jungle, but I certainly got more comfortable in it. One thing that you always had to be very careful about in the work that Recon did was heat casualties. Mm-hmm. You took a serious heat casualty, that's an emergency medevac, which is, again, announcing to the whole world that there's Marines out here and one of them's, down with a heat casualty. As a consequence, the days we were back in the area, 1st Platoon Delta Company PT'd every day. People thought we were crazy. I took my heat casualties on Freedom Hill Road, running 2.5 miles down, 2.5 miles back, including myself, stopping to barf. Never had a heat casualty in the 5.5 months I led patrol, something I was very proud of.
Yeah, you got to carry enough water for that, though. Really, right?
You just had to ration yourself, and each individual was...
So you said 8 canteens, you're bringing 8 canteens of water.
8 to 10 canteens of water, you bet.
And that's going to last you 8 days?
6 or 7. Yeah.
6 or 7
Unless we
days.
got extended, which was not unheard of. the Marine Corps helicopters would be, some operation would start while you were on patrol. They'd be tasked for medevacs, and you couldn't get out the day you were supposed to. You prayed, I guess, would be the nice thing to say, that you got out the next day. Because by then your food was exhausted, your water was either gone or real short.
Yeah, we used to have heat casualties in training out here in California, out in the Imperial Valley, where it's 120 degrees. And it's tough. And like you said, a guy can go from he's fine to all of a sudden he's like a legitimate
you gotta get
casualty.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Let's go to July 4th, 1968. What was going into that operation? What was the overall operation that you guys were looking to do?
We were looking to find an old LZ in a place called Charlie Ridge. You said you had neighborhoods and areas that were hotter than others in Ramadi. We had the same thing, of course, in Vietnam. Some places were known as hot spots. You'd almost guaranteed, somebody was going to shoot a few rounds at you, coming in or going out if they didn't find you or you didn't find them during your patrol. But we were supposed to flip-flop. We'd go in and another team would come out on the top of this mountain, and the team had gotten lost. They didn't know where they were. So they finally somehow, scraped their Sierra together, and we went out and we flip-flopped with them, but we were way far away from this. They were 3,000 or 4,000 meters away from this mountaintop where we were supposed to flip-flop with another team. So I really pushed the patrol to find. This place was really hard to find if these guys couldn't find it. No, they just were lost. But we found that thing on the second day, an old fire base on the top of this mountain. Like 3 years of sea rats on the side of the mountain because we had NVA walking trail below us. They'd stop and have lunch there, eat old seas. Ham and lima beans, I think, supplied half the NVA in Vietnam because Marines just always pitched those things. Nobody ate. We call them ham and mothers. Nobody ate them. But so we had a flip-flop. So I didn't want to get too far away from this LZ because I wanted another LZ within, 3 or 4 clicks. So we were going to, we harbored that night, moved off into the jungle outside the LZ, harbored that night, had some big rocks around us. Thought we were in a good position. And at night, I would pre-plot fires, artillery targets north, south, east, west around our position in case you had to call them in the middle of the night. You didn't have to figure out what's our 6 numbers here. No, these targets were already plotted in. So we woke up the next morning, and we were just going to kind of lay low all day long in that area. It wasn't something you really wanted to do, but since we were scheduled to flip-flop, and battalion really wanted us to do that because it hadn't worked, when we had gone in. We should have gone in where we were going out. But they wanted to flip-flop. So I said, but we're just going to lay low for this day, and then we'll be out of here the next morning. Well, that morning, I guess some, 12-man NVA recon patrol walked close aboard or came by close aboard us. We never heard them. But they either saw a flash of motion, because we were eating breakfast, or they heard us, which I don't think they did because we were super quiet. But all of a sudden, all this automatic fire opened up, and fortunately it was over our heads, because that's pretty typical happening in the jungle. Mm-hmm. You shoot high. But I had a big rock kind of behind me, so I'm getting guys maneuvered around, starting to call the artillery in, when a bullet apparently hits the rock behind me, comes back, hits me in the head from behind, goes forward. Boom, I'm down, and I'm almost history. Next thing I know, my corpsman is doing a pat down on me. Apparently the bullet had gone through my floppy cover and didn't knock it off. And it wasn't until he saw blood starting to run down the side of my face that he realized that the wound was up here, but because there was nothing visible. So he's doing a pat down, and I knew what that meant. I knew I'd been shot, and I knew he didn't know where it was. But I never did figure out it was in my head or in the head. I concluded sometime that morning, because we were on the ground for about another 4 hours before they tried to get us out. that I had been bitten by a centipede. They had some nasty centipedes over there whose venom apparently attacked your central nervous system. So that was my working theory that morning, was that I had been bit by a centipede, which really pissed me off.
How long were you unconscious for after you got hit?
I was unconscious just for a few seconds because, 1 minute I'm kneeling, I'm a lean, green, mean fighting machine, and the next moment I'm lying down, I'm a lean, mean, green stalk of broccoli.
How much time had passed between the initial fire, incoming fire, and you getting hit?
It was really just a matter maybe of 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'm trying to get guys positioned. In recon, we did not want to fire back. If somebody, started firing at you, they didn't really know where you were, especially with this fire going high. And the last thing you wanted to do really was fire back, because now we know where they are, and then So the deal was not to fire back. Just bring in supporting arms as quick as you could. But eventually, of course, the guys started to fire back because it was just a little too hot.
And I just thought of this. I'm guessing you guys wouldn't carry like a heavy machine gun with you, like an M60 or something?
No, we didn't. Too heavy, and then we had two more guys tasked with ammunition. Mm-hmm. And you can't really, get one of those things set up quickly, in the jungle. But occasionally we did. Occasionally, the warning order that I would get from battalion would say, you're taking an M60 on this patrol because we've had reports of X, Y, and Z in this area, and you might need it. So great. Obviously, somebody had to volunteer to do that, and my littlest guy, his nickname was Mouse. He would always volunteer to carry the M60. Great kid. Never really had to use it in the jungle, which was good, but occasionally we carried it.
So here you are, you're 5 minutes into this gunfight, you get hit, you're unconscious for a very short period of time, and then you come back to, and how do you feel when you come back?
Again, I didn't know what had happened. Again, my first thought was the centipede thing, but sounds were muffled, color was gone, things were moving slowly in black and white around me, and sounds were very muffled. By now, the artillery was starting to come in. We had a brand new second lieutenant with us. He was on his first snap-in patrol. He apparently assumed command, along with my experienced corporal, who normally was the patrol leader for this patrol. And together they managed the situation, and we got everybody out. I was the only one wounded. Take that back. Crew chief on the helicopter that picked us up was wounded. He was on a .50 caliber and got hit in the hand. But we were the only two wounded. I was the only guy in my patrol wounded. The corpsman, outstanding, second-class hospitalman. He kept me alive for the next 4 hours until they could get me into Da Nang.
How bad were you bleeding?
Apparently I bled out. There's a cavity down the center of your head called the superior sagittal sinus. It's like an upside-down triangle, and it drains blood in your brain, and that was nicked by the bullet. It was just close enough to midline to nick the superior sagittal sinus. And I can remember my corpsman just kept putting battle dressing after battle dressing on my head. That ruined my whole day, needless to say.
Were you like passing back out and then waking back up?
I was. I remember I knew I could hear the helicopter coming in, and I knew we were about to break out of the jungle to run to the Z that the helicopter was coming in that we had been on the day before. So I took all the strength I could to open my eyes and look up, and all I saw was tracers converging kind of over us from all points of the compass. Damn, this is serious.
I got some information that your kids gathered up, and one of them was a note from Captain Frederick Rick J. Wilson III, and he wrote this little kind of description of what happened. He says, "I was the pilot of the CH-46 YT TAC-13 MMH 164 that rescued your team. What you couldn't know was that a lot of people, including your recon team, were responsible for getting you to the hospital. I vividly remember the mission because my crew chief was wounded." That's the guy you just talked about.
Right.
He, like you, also survived and prospered. He and I received silver stars for our actions that day. You tend to remember things like that. I flew 928 missions in Vietnam, and that one was my hairiest. I first heard that your team was in trouble and you were wounded when I was landing at Da Nang Hospital with another medevac. Because of your head injuries, I was able to get a corpsman at the hospital before I headed out for the rescue. It turned out to be the corpsman Terry Daly, was from my hometown of Wakefield, Rhode Island. I found this out 20 years later when Terry's wife showed up at my sister's house with an old copy of Stars and Stripes that covered the mission. Your team evidently ran into an NVA base camp that no one knew was there and was greatly outnumbered. Because of your wounds and the combat situation, an extraction was requested and I was the closest to the action. The problem soon became apparent that the team needed to move about 200 yards to an old bomb crater where I could land. I called for gunship support and some fast movers. What I got was 4 flights of Phantoms dropping bombs pretty close to the team and 4 Huey gunships. I was circling overhead for about an hour before the team got to the only feasible landing zone on the ridge. They did a good job suppressing fire until I was landing. Fortunately, the bomb crater also protected me somewhat, and we were able to get everyone on board. I was a little short on fuel, but that worked in my favor because I was also about 2,000 pounds over gross, according to my co-pilot, who was wondering if we could lift off. In the meantime, your team and my gunner were engaged in a firefight. Your team knocked out all the windows on my bird, but I didn't object because they were covering my butt. We managed to take off and took a few hits out on the way, but thanks to the Hueys escorting me, I was able to dive off the ridge and get out of range. Long story short, we were able to get everyone to the hospital, and the NVA got a beating. So he had to just take off and just fly over this ridge right as...
Yeah, apparently he just kind of dove off the ridge and, gained speed, came back up. I heard that this thing was so riddled with bullets, this helicopter, was that the Marine Corps helicopter facility was across this highway from the hospital in Da Nang. They wouldn't fly it over there. They called for a tug to tow it over there. I think we're going to try to put that thing back in the air that day.
Oh, man. He continues on, and this was a nice, I'm taking bits of this from a nice letter that he wrote, but he says, I understand that you count that day as an alive day, which is a very good thing to celebrate. I was probably one of the few Marines who enjoyed their tour in Vietnam, primarily because I was saving lives and rescuing recon teams. I also love the flying since they would never let you fly like that back in the States. One of the best things to come out of Vietnam was the improvement in medical care. You are proof of that as the survival rates from as are the survival rates from Iraq and Afghanistan. Hope you have a wonderful 50th rebirthday. Happy birthday, Marine. And that, once again, that's Captain Frederick Rick J. Wilson III.
Yeah, he was the command pilot that day, and that bird that pulled me and the team out saved all our lives. No question about it. Were you guys under the threat of being overrun at some point soon? I tell you the truth, Jocko, I have no idea, really. My memory of that day was pretty sketchy.
So I talked to him on the phone last year, and he said they had to circle overhead for an hour because they just couldn't set it down. There was no possible way, and they estimated probably 200 NVA on the ground, and that's part of the reason why they weren't able to fly it back to squadron, because small arms fire through rotor blades.
As an infantry officer, I always felt very comfortable on the ground and very exposed on the helicopter. I just figured those were things were flying magnets that made a lot of noise. But of course, the aviators felt just the other way. They felt safe in their birds and never wanted to be on the ground. Never.
I feel the exact same thing as you. I didn't ever liked any sort of machine. I didn't like any of them. I wanted to just be on my feet.
Exactly.
So, and yeah, that feeling that you have in a helicopter when you're up flying, and all you see is, all I see when I'm flying in a helicopter is threats. And you can't even come close to covering them all. At least on the ground, I can cover some of the threats. When you're in an aircraft, it's like, I'm waiting to get shot down. That's what it feels like to me. When do you remember coming to, or when do you remember what they do with you once you got in the hospital? Do you remember much of that?
No, I remember the helicopter landing because my head bounced on the metal. I was like, damn, couldn't I put something underneath my head? And I remember them picking me up and putting me on a stretcher because they grabbed my belt and picked up my middle, and it felt like a drug just going right through me. I faintly remember the sound of hearing this guy that sounded like he was on the other side of a football field saying, negative vitals, negative vitals, negative vitals. And then the next thing I felt this crush on my chest. And I thought, that's okay, because, they're getting the heart back up. Checking,
Oh, so they were like doing CPR.
Yeah. Well, I was apparently resuscitated 3 times just after the helicopter landed at the NSA Da Nang, the hospital. But my corpsman had been straddling me the whole time in the helicopter and was pushing on the heart to keep blood flowing. It was not my best day, but hey, well, I'm here talking about it, so
we'll take it.
That makes a huge difference, believe me, because there's no reason I should be. When I left Bethesda after a year, my attending physician was the chief of neurosurgery. And he called me in his office and said, "Hey, Ike, said, I wish that medicine could take credit for this, but nah," he said, "we can't." He says, "I don't know, it's whatever you want to call it, karma, luck, God, whatever you want to call it. I wish it was medicine, but it wasn't." So I figured he was a pretty leading expert on head injuries.
How long so you get to the hospital and you're there, at some point they must have gotten you stabilized.
They must have, yeah. As I understood it, the chief neurosurgeon from the hospital ship just happened to be there that day, like giving an in-service or something like that. And boom, they were on me like flies on stink. I just remember waking up, being extremely cold, and hearing a baby cry and cry and cry. And I said, "This can't be right. Maybe I'm not here." But sure enough, it turned out there was a corpsman told me later, a couple days later, that there was a baby that had been burned, due to U.S. force action, who was, this was like a ward that was an intensive care ward, apparently. And there was a baby in there with a couple of mama sons, and the baby did cry almost all the time. And that's what I remember. My troops came to say goodbye. 22 of them, they let them in groups of 2. All I could do was cry. I didn't have words for him other than to say things like, "Keep your head down," and stuff like that. Because I knew by then that I'd had a head injury. And I knew, it just slowly dawned on me. No one told me, that this left side was paralyzed along with my right leg. No one told me that. It just came to me over time when I would try to do something. The only way I could get attention was I had this perfect left paralysis down the side of my face. So I would talk like that. I'd raise my hand. They tied it down to the bed rails because that's all the IVs were in the right arm. Well, I was helpless. I've never been so miserable as that moment when they tied that arm down.
And it's just the trauma to your brain that it caused you to be paralyzed in your left arm and was your left side of your body?
Left side of my body and the right leg. It was the bullet had blown away about 3 by 7 centimeter defect in my skull. It had penetrated the meninges, nicked the parietal lobe and the frontal lobes, and tore the superior sagittal sinus. So that's a wound that's incompatible with life as we know it. But here I am telling you about it. So,
one of your guys. Once again, your kids did an awesome job gathering some information. One of your guys, Robert Wood Daley Baird, the third.
Yep.
And you're a third too?
I'm second.
Okay. I thought for some reason he thought that you were third, but yeah. So he's the third. He was a Lance Corporal in 1st Platoon, Delta Company, 1st Recon Battalion, and he talks about, and he starts off kind of telling what it was like for him to meet you and how impressed he was with you as a leader, and actually felt what you talked about earlier. It was like, that he could tell that you cared about the troops. And then it gets to this point where he's coming. They're coming to this journey to say goodbye to you. And so here's what Robert Wood Daley Baird III says. He says, "Then that afternoon, the team made a solemn journey to the Naval Hospital to see the lieutenant. Everyone watched the scenery without really seeing it as we rode along in a 6x truck. We were too worried about him. We arrived and went to Neuro Ward Bravo 2. We could only see him 2 at a time, and since I was new, I was last. I waited. When my teammates came out, they looked pale. Then it was my turn. I was nervous. I entered the ward. It was lengthy with empty racks here at the near end. Each rack was covered with a crisp white sheet ready for its next visitor. On a long shelf on the right, there were plastic models of planes, ships, and cars that the patients had made. I walked onward. One of the healthier men was putting together a model plane. On the left was an ancient papasan with white hair, his beard a dirty gray contrasted with his hospital tunic. A nurse with an angelic voice attracted my attention. I noticed her face, firm with conviction, and wondered how she could work in such a tragic place. She was feeding a baby. Seeing that struck me deeply. The baby was burned over 70% of its body. I pressed onward, but paused, wondering what I should say. Patients filled the beds at this end of the ward. Unhealed wounds, burns, scars, and vacant stares stabbed out at me. Half of a face there. No eyes and no arm, legs here. Bodies covered with gauze, seemingly mummified. The morbid display made me realize how truly bad war is, but the worst was yet to come. I passed Harry Mundorf and Rudy Seville. They were coming out. Somehow they didn't look the same as when I'd seen them a short time ago. There he was, in the last rack on the left. He lay on his right side and glanced up with glazed eyes when I approached. A turban of bandages covered his head. His pale face showed no emotion except sadness, and his eyes were red from crying. All the time we talked, he stared at the airborne parachute wings on my chest as if they were something he wanted very badly. He had told me when I had first joined the platoon that he hadn't gone to jump school yet, and that he was looking forward to it. He started by saying, "Hello, Baird, how you doing?" I said, "Good afternoon, sir, I'm fine." His voice was weak, like a child who was afraid. At times I could barely hear him. He added again to the conversation by thanking all of us, and I replied that it had been the least we could do. Then I asked him if he'd be back at recon in 3 months or so. A tear came to his eye, and he said he would never be coming back. "You see," he said, "my legs are paralyzed." I choked up and my skin crawled and I was unable to speak. A silence cold and heavy prevailed. Finally, he broke the silence, saying, "Baird, you're a big man and there's something I want you to do. Keep your head down there. Keep your head down when you're out in the bush." This statement hit me and grabbed at my heart, and I screamed inside myself, deep, deep down somewhere that I never knew existed. I promised him that I would, and bid him my fondest farewell, turned and walked away. I wanted to run from him, from them, from the whole world. I wanted to run past those helpless men in those metal beds, out to the street and far, far away, but I kept my control and walked at a brisk pace. The echoes of that scream resounded inside me again and again, threatening to tear me apart. Suddenly, the anguish melted away as I stepped out into the brutal tropic sun. But the feeling that I had still ran like hot lava through my veins. The ride back home was the same. No one looked at the scenery or at each other nor talked with anyone. Each was involved with their own memories of Second Lieutenant Charles Robert Eisenbach II. He was a man with such brilliant mind and exuberance to be alive. Now he lay in a hospital suffering a far worse fate to him than death. His once healthy body was now frail and flimsy, like a person who had always been an invalid. Left only was his mind, and he had too much time to think and reflect upon what had happened and what was going to happen. It was a great strain and shock to see him. With hope, he will work his way back, because he does have guts. And what's interesting about that's a heavy, rendering of what happened, but that's actually from his personal journal that he kept while he was in Vietnam. Those are the thoughts of probably a 20-year-old kid seeing this unfold.
Yeah. Well, needless to say, Lance Corporal Baird, I think he had a year of college. He was kind of a platoon spokesman. He became a writer and a poet. So he obviously had a great command of the English language, and maybe saw some things or invented some things that weren't necessarily there, but that was his reality, and that's fine with me. I can't argue with it. Nothing he said in there I don't think was untrue. I was what we call a hurtin' gator. In fact, I remember they told me that I was going to an Army hospital in Japan. Well, only thing I knew was that Marines, when they got wounded in Vietnam, they went to a naval hospital in Yokohama. So I just pissed a little hissy fit and said, "Why are you sending me to an Army hospital?" Not knowing that this Army hospital in Camp Drake outside of Tachikawa Air Force Base in Japan was where all head injuries went. That was their specialty, was head injuries. So they finally got a doc in there to calm me down and tell me how this was the place I needed to be. And one hospital was just as good as another, which of course you don't believe when when it's not your service's hospital. But hey, I was a 23-year-old kiddo, and I had been in naval hospitals before and had always gotten great care, and that's what I was expecting. And it turned out this general support hospital that I ended up at was first rate. I was there for like 10 days before I was stable enough to make the plane trip back home, and interesting place.
So 10 days you're there. Are they doing surgeries on you, or are they just trying to let you heal up?
They're just kind of letting me heal up, and they've started physical therapy on me. I had tremendous spasms in both my legs and my left arm, so they had physical therapy, make some braces that they put on my feet, and they made a hand brace for me with my thumb sticking out like this. And when my arm would spaz, this thing would come and beat me in the eye. I'd have to hold this arm down. I was miserable. There was just a young kid to my right who'd lost an eye. He was an Air Force airman, and had lost an eye in Da Nang, and that was his problem. That was his major problem. And he had been tasked to be my feeder and my smoker. I was a smoker then, and I would just crave a Camel, and he'd have to be around to handle it because I couldn't deal with it. But terrific kid, and they took excellent care of me in this hospital, just like they did everybody else.
So the spasms in your arms and legs, which we were all, admittedly, all of us just laughed when you told that story,
right,
which is pretty disturbing, but that had to be a little bit of a good sign, because some kind of spasm means that there's some nerve signal getting there.
Well, exactly, and what it was a screwed up signal. It wasn't telling the thing to do anything useful. It was just telling these muscles to fire. Again, from the damaged area in my brain, as I understand it. Looking back on it.
But that was your mindset, that you're going now from, hey, when you said you were paralyzed when you initially got hit. And now you can't move your leg, you can't move either one of your legs or your left arm.
Right.
And did you, in your mind, did you think, okay, this might be it? I might be paralyzed like this forever?
Well, of course, you don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But the better you become, the more aware you become of your limitations, and you start to think, how long is this going to last? Is this forever? What am I going to do for the rest of my life? You're not going to be a Marine because they don't have a job description of Marines for in wheelchairs or something like that. But the one saving grace I always thought was, well, I'm single. At least there's not a wife involved and a child on the way like most of my contemporaries had. But conversely, the guys who were as I found out later on at Bethesda, the guys who were married felt it was much better to be married because you had this, direct support system that you were coming back into, and you knew this woman was going to be there. They weren't, of course, always. Things don't last a lot of times when you get big changes like that in your life, unfortunately. But the guys who were married thought it was much better to be married, and those of us who were single thought it was much better to be single. But sure, you say, that's the first question out of your mind is when you get to your final destination, which for me was Bethesda Naval Hospital, was, Doc, how long am I going to be here? Mm-hmm. Well, they don't have any idea. They don't know how your recovery is going to unwind. So finally, my doctor said to me, hey, you could be here for 2 years, and I can't guarantee that you'll walk out even then. I thought to myself, well, damn, he doesn't know who he's dealing with. My plan, I got shot on the 4th of July. My plan was to be back in Vietnam by Christmas with my guys. That didn't work out, but that was my plan. And I worked hard to make it happen. It didn't happen. A year later, I walked out of there under my own power with a leg brace and a cane, and got on an ambulance and was driven down the road 95 to the VA hospital in Richmond, Virginia, where I stayed for another 4 months. But you don't know what's going to happen. You're just it's a slowly evolving, kind of mental process you go through. You hit a point. I did, and I know other guys did too, because we talked about this. Well, you'd say, "Why me? Why me, God? Why did this happen to me?" And I don't know if other guys got an answer to that question, but I did. Over time, this answer evolved, and the answer was, "Why not you, Eisenbach? Who are you? You're no better than anybody else I put down that little blue planet, but you're no worse either. So you're just going to have to go with the punches." And that's the answer. Why not you? You're no better, no worse than anybody else. I mean, that's a little hard, I think, for some people to stomach, but that was the answer I got. And, it served its purpose. Okay, why not me? This is it. This is the way it is. I guess I just have to take it a day at a time and do my best to get better and see where I end up. And when I get to that point, I'll make decisions about what I'm going to do for the future, which I did. I had a lot of vocational counseling from the VA when I got flushed, out of the service and out of the VA system. I got a lot of, like I said, vocational counseling. I got interest tests that I take, because the question now is, okay, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Well, not surprisingly, I scored highest on military officer. Hoorah! Gee, I just was one of those a couple of months ago. Second highest was FBI agent. Oh, that sounds good, but again, they don't have job descriptions for guys who limp, And finally, I scored third on teacher. I said, well, that's interesting. And that evolved into thinking about becoming a therapist. And specifically a speech therapist. I had a speech defect that I just kind of overcame myself at Bethesda by slowing down and trying to think about what I was going to say before I said it. And I got the nickname Spock because my speech became very deliberate. But when I was just spontaneous, apparently, and I never heard this, but my roommate would say, "Eisenbach." I said, "What?" He said, "What was with that language?" I said, "What language?" We maybe had some visitors, a couple of gals from people I knew who were overseas in Vietnam. He said, "It was terrible. It was filthy." I'd say, "Really?" I never heard it. And he said, "Yeah." So I started to slow down myself and try to think about what I would say. But speech therapist kind of stuck in my mind after this vocational counseling that I got, and that's eventually what I became, was a speech language pathologist.
So when he's saying your speech was filthy, you mean that you were like swearing?
Oh yeah. Yeah, just using every filthy word.
like what's that, Tourette syndrome? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
like a Tourette syndrome scenario.
And I had no idea that I was doing that. I didn't hear it.
Because you just did it naturally, like that's how you talked, kind of thing, or like why didn't you remember it?
No, it wasn't how I normally would speak. It would just come out in totally inappropriate situations. Not amongst the guys, but amongst visitors. And like I said, I didn't know what was going on. But
you kind of glanced over the fact that you got the feedback, hey, you can't stay in the Marine Corps anymore, and it sounds like you figured that out yourself, but at some point that's got to turn into a harsh reality where that's what you wanted to do. Right, you're in Vietnam, you're a platoon commander, you got the best guys in the world, and all of a sudden in one day it's gone.
It's right, it's gone, and you don't know what's going to replace it. But yeah, eventually you get before a physical evaluation board, and what I had hoped for, because most of my roommates and most of the guys there I knew that had Marines, they had orthopedic injuries. They'd gotten stitched up with a machine gun in their legs or whatever. They got put on the temporary disabled retired list. That allowed you 5 years to regain your ability. And if you could, you would get a chance to go back into the Marine Corps. On the other hand, if you got better, the VA could drop your disability rating down. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. Most guys just wanted to get out. But for guys like me that they call lifers, because I wanted a career in it. And I argued that I could fly any desk. Well, that was fine, but that wasn't gonna fly. I was gonna be retired. But as long as I was on the TDRL, the temporary disabled retired list, I thought, well, I got a chance. But I'm at the VA hospital now. I've been through my physical evaluation board. They've asked me questions, and I've got a transcript of it. My doctor submitted statements and stuff like that. And they said, well, we'll get you on the TDRL. And I said, great, because I'd have 5 years to work myself back in the Corps. Came through, my orders for retirement orders came through one day, and when I was in the VA hospital, permanent disabled retired list. No chance of ever getting back. Boy, I was pissed beyond just talking about it. I was on the phone to the Secretary of Navy's office, which I got through to, and I had some nice older woman right there who obviously had heard this story before. You know, I was promised the TDRL, but I've been permanently retired. She said, well, Lieutenant, you've got to understand that, you know, we've done this a few times before, and we kind of know the history of these kinds of injuries, and your board did recommend the permanent retired disabled list, not the temporary. So, you know, we have to go with what they say, and of course they were right. But again, you know, I was, you know, by now I'm old man at 24, right, and I'm being retired. Excuse me, that's not the plan. But that's how it all worked.
How long did it take you to realize, how long did it take you to accept that? So you kind of got through the why me, why not me?
Right.
How long did it take you to get through this fact that, okay, now the Marine Corps, your sacred Marine Corps has made this decision?
You know, I'm still thinking about that, Jocko, to tell you the truth.
So 50 odd years.
That's right. Yeah, now I got a new why me question here. But no, I adjusted. I went down to graduate school, got a master's degree in the speech department at the University of Florida, and they weren't quite sure what had walked through the door when I arrived. I wanted to know where the coffee mess was. And they're all looking at me like, the what? So, well, you know, the place where you just drop in the morning, get a cup of coffee, pay a dime or whatever. Well, we don't have anything like that. Well, we're going to get one.
We do now.
We do now, that's right. And most of my classes were on the third floor of this building, which had an elevator that went up to the third floor, but it didn't work, hadn't worked in years. And so I went to my advisor. I said, look, this 3 flights of stairs is killing me 2 and 3 times a day. You know, we got to get that elevator working. I said, oh, can't do it, Ike. No way. It hasn't worked since I've been here, the prof said. I said, well, we'll see about that. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go talk to the president. The president? What president? The president of the university. He said, you can't do that. I said, really? Watch me. So I did. He wasn't there, but his like chief of staff was, who happened to be a guy who had kind of an arm injury from World War II. And he said, oh, it can't be repaired, can it? I said, well, that's what they're telling me, sir. He said, I'll take care of it. Well, the next day it was working just fine, and worked for the next 3 years during my master's program. Didn't have a down day.
How we kind of jumped over this part. How long were you in Bethesda for total?
I was in Bethesda for a little over 12 months.
And throughout that time, you know, when you showed up, when you got wounded, you couldn't move your legs or arm. What was the progression like getting you back to you know, the best state that you got to?
Yeah. Well, it was physical therapy, occupational therapy, you know, once a day, which I decided if once a day was good, twice might be better. So I argued for that, and pretty soon I got that. By November, my right leg had started to get remarkably better. My left leg still wasn't real useful, but you put a brace on it, and I could, by November, I was walking. Now, granted, I had a crutch on one side, on the right side, a loft-strand crutch, you know, the metal things we called polio crutches back then, but I don't know what they're typical. I think I call them loft-strand crutches because that's the guy who invented it. And a corpsman on my left side, but I was walking, you know. And of course, I went back to, I finally dropped the corpsman and went to 2 loft-strand crutches, dropped the left one after a while, back to the right one, then dropped that to a cane and a leg brace on my left, and I did fine for about 42 years that way. About 8 years ago, my right leg decided to take an early retirement on me, and so I had to start wearing a brace on that leg, and I was falling too much, so they put me into an electric wheelchair, which is what I scoot around the house and around town in. That scooter over there is what it flies. My wheelchair doesn't fly. It's 247 pounds, and it doesn't fly. But that flies. That breaks down into 4 or 5 parts, and my wife can do it usually by her own. Of course, this weekend we've had the kids to help her. Just throw it in the back of a.
I know some of the notes.
Off we go.
Speaking of you falling down, some of the notes had you wearing a football helmet while you were down there. And it sounded like that made quite an impact on some of the places that you'd visit with your football helmet on. And
Well, I was falling when I started to, walk independently at the hospital. I had a left foot drop, which means the brace was supposed to bring it up so it clears all the little obstacles that you don't ever pay attention to when you got 2 good feet. But I would fall into elevators because they wouldn't be exactly aligned, and I'd fall into everybody in there. So eventually, I started. They say you need a football helmet.
Yeah, because you got the wounds.
Right. I've got a defect up there. You could put your hand in my defect and take my pulse just like this. If I squeezed hard, the thing would pop up. But
when'd you get a titanium plate in there?
Oh, that was after about a year. At the end of my year, they waited a year before they put a plate in your skull because it was considered a contaminated wound. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what that meant to the medical people, but to me it meant you waited a year and put the plate in. But so this football helmet, my dad got it from the University of Delaware where he worked, and it was blue with like a Michigan thing with yellow stripes. So in occupational therapy, I got a can of olive draft paint, and they'd make me do everything with my left hand. I spray painted this thing olive draft. My roommate at the time, he had been there longer than I had, and apparently I was the perfect roommate for him because I had lost my sense of smell and taste, and apparently he'd been in a body spica cast from here down to his knees for like 6 months, and he stunk to high heaven. So, and I didn't smell him, so I was apparently the perfect. His sister got this button book where you had a blank button and a bunch of things you could put on the button, but it also had some bullet holes with the shattered glass type things. So I put one of those on the front of the football helmet, and I had a little badge, maybe 3 inches around, said my head is a depressed area. Said, and I'd wear that on my bathrobe around the hospital. People would stop and look at me, and they'd read that, and they'd look at me, and they go, oh. And they kind of move out of the way. They didn't want to mess with this guy. He might have been crazy.
Dark humor is popular in our family.
Yeah, dark humor, at Bethesda at that time, there was probably always about a dozen of us young lieutenants, between the 8th floor and the 14th floor of the, they call it Roosevelt's erection, the tower at Bethesda. Anyway, and we didn't know it at the time, but we had a great group dynamic going on. There was always someone who was worse off than you. So when you started to feel sorry for yourself or started to get down, your buddies would come in and say, hey, what about Eisenbach over there? Or what about Vitucci over here? Or so-and-so, Smitty. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, there was always somebody better off than you was putting up the good fight. So, you never got too down on yourself.
No, those are important lessons for life, right there.
You bet.
I mean, we can complain. I'll be the person complaining about I jammed my finger and I'm all mad about it because I can't do something. It's like, no, what you need to do is be quiet, and as I always say, do what you can.
Sure,
do what you can. So you get down. So now we'll go back to college. You got the elevator working. You got and how long does it take? How long does it take to get your doctorate? What'd you get your doctorate in?
I got my doctorate in speech language pathology, with a minor in psychology. But at first I had to get the master's, and I'm not sure how the University of Florida looked at my transcript from the Naval Academy and how they factored in, weapons and navigation and courses like that I took. But I had to do a whole lot of undergraduate courses before I could, move into the graduate level courses. So it took me, I think, about 3 years to get the master's degree going to school full time. And the VA was picking up the tab for that. VA has been very good to me, very good. And I know there's a lot of complaints out there about the VA, and I'm sure some of them are warranted to some degree or another. But you've got to understand with the VA, it doesn't happen yesterday. It doesn't happen 5 minutes from now. It'll happen down the road. But as long as you check every box and go from A, B, C, D instead of trying to jump from A to F, it'll all work for you. Great outfit.
At what point did you meet Sherry?
I met Sherry after I had my master's degree. I worked for a year down in Orlando at an Easter Seals community, and it was a great experience. One of my old profs at the University of Florida invited me to come back up to the medical center there and become one of the staff speech pathologists at the medical center. And I said, great, so I did that. Sherry was a staff occupational therapist, had an office kind of across the hall from me. We met, and being dull normal about these things, like most men apparently, I didn't catch on fast enough. So we had a mutual friend who was the other master speech pathologist there, and she had us over for dinner one night. Great. And I still didn't get it. So we were at a convention one summer, and we were having lunch together, myself and the other speech pathologist, who was also a friend of Sherry's. And she said, Ike, why do you think I invited you and Sherry over for dinner? I said, you like us? She said, listen, when we get back from this convention, if you don't ask her out within 2 weeks, she's going to ask you out. I said, oh, God. So, I asked her out, and we went out. We dated for a while, and eventually, everything fell into place, and we got engaged. Meanwhile, I had kind of given up on marriage. I had dated a fair amount, and I was just running into wall after wall. So, but I decided, I wanted to be a dad. I love kids. I'd always loved kids. So I went to the Children's Aid Society of Florida and told them, I wanted to adopt a kiddo. Well, back then, and this was now the late 60s, early 70s, they looked at you like you had a hole in your head, of course, which I did. So that was okay. But they said, look, they gave me all this stuff to read and all these exercises to go through and said, you come back in a couple of months, and if you still want to pursue this thing, we'll talk about it. Well, so I did, and this process took about 9 months, but eventually I was approved. I mean, everybody in my family had to submit letters, and all my friends, and they sliced and diced me up one side and down the other, because they weren't going to let one of their kiddos get in a home with some kind of freaky guy, and which you totally understand. Yeah. But getting engaged, all that went away. If you're going to get married, that's what they wanted. They wanted, obviously, a two-person situation for their kids and a stable. So if you got engaged or something like that during this process, it was over. But I had been accepted, and sure enough, as soon as we got engaged, I called my caseworker and told her, "Just great, Ike, way to go!" And boom, the adoption's off, though. I said, "Okay, that's fine. We'll do it the old-fashioned way," which we did.
And at this time, you still pursuing your doctorate at this time?
I'm pursuing my doctorate at this time. That's right. And that was about 7 years going to school half-time and working half-time. I'd get a fellowship at the VA and half-time research fellowship or clinical fellowship and stuff like that, and go to school half-time. My VA money had run out by then, so I was funding this, which was fine with me.
And then at some point, you finished with the marriage, you get married, and you start having kids.
This is true.
Matt,
he's the third kiddo.
Here we go.
My time to shine.
Yeah, this is your moment. What was it like for you?
Yeah.
You're growing up with a dad.
I don't think it was a typical childhood compared to my friends. He would charge into our room. It probably felt like 4 a.m, but it was probably more like 7 o'clock. Wake us up. We'd all be out like in the hallway, in line, like formed up, ready to go prior to school, and he would do what he called belly busters, which is basically morning PT with the family. And obviously, like, it was very limited, but we did like push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, what else do you have us do?
That's about the only thing I was thinking of.
Yeah. And so it was just like, I don't think anybody else's kids did that at the time.
You haven't met my kids.
Right.
Oh, there you go.
He would wake us up by like playing Reveille. I knew what Reveille was before I joined the military. It was
They couldn't chew gum.
It was somewhat controlled chaos. There was a lot of discipline there that maybe other kids didn't have. We got put on restriction, which I didn't know what that was until I went to NAPS.
Like as opposed to being grounded?
As opposed to being grounded, we got put on restriction, and that's just what it was called. And we had to like explain what it was to our friends. And
can't go to the movies now. I'm on restriction.
Right.
Sorry.
What is that? So we have to explain that's being grounded. He was kind of like this hero to like a lot of our friends though, because he was really good with our friends, and he was just like kind of like a wild man. He was notorious throughout the school system of not being a guy to mess with if you were like a school administrator. I think
you mess with my kids, I'm going to be talking to you.
This is not in the notes, but I'll tell this story. I think it was like 6th grade, and I had a friend who would get in trouble in class regularly, and I'm the youngest kid, so a lot of teachers knew who I was, and my sisters were probably better at school at that time than I was. And so, the teacher pulls me aside one day, and she's like, hey, you need to stop being friends with Chino. He's just a bad influence on you. And so I go home, tell my dad that. He goes, well, we'll see. Next day, like, it's, the school that has, like, the loudspeaker that, like, clicks on from when the office calls. And I think, one of the office staff was like, Mrs. Schneiderman, I think Mr. Eisenbach is here. She's like, oh, great, I'll send Matt down to the office. And you could kind of hear it in the voice of the office staff, and they were like, no, he's here to see you. And the whole class was just like, what is happening? So yeah, it was clearly different. It's the growing up with like somebody that is like the essence of the Marine Corps, like discipline, kind of like iron-fisted, is what people think.
But fair.
Sure. Yeah. That's what we're calling it these days. Most of the time, like, there were things that, you just have to do because that's the way I want them done, or that's what I said.
That's how we do them in our house.
Right. Which is like, that's what he wants. So, you kind of had to grow up learning just to like, roll with that sort of stuff, which is, a lot of what you see in the military is like, we do things this way just because it's the way we do it. Or it's because the way I want it. But, not everything is like that in the military. You get, input, which at like 8 years old, I didn't have a lot of input in things. But
so at what point did you decide you were going to go to the Naval Academy?
Like him, we would schedule trips around the Annapolis area to go visit friends, and we'd wind up, at the academy, or
psychological warfare.
Right. We'd go to San Diego for spring break and go check out the naval station, things like that. And so, I had kind of known for a while, like, I want to be a pilot. This is kind of what I want to do. And I think the best way to go about that is probably go to the Naval Academy. And so I'd probably like early high school kind of had that idea in mind. Like him, I probably wasn't the best student ever. I got better over time, but at that time I didn't really like put a lot of effort into school and homework. So I had to go to what was called Naval Academy Prep School, which is just, basically an academic year to get you ready for the Naval Academy. I found out about restriction there.
What restriction really was.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, if I can, one of my favorite stories about Matt was when he was getting ready to apply for the Naval Academy. I thought he had taken the PSAT or whatever that is, the pre-SAT, and I thought, well, we got to bump this up a little bit. So, I'll challenge him. So I made a bet with him. I said, I bet I can score higher on the SAT than you can. And he looks at me like, of course, I got 3 heads and 14 ears. Oh, Dad. So I meanwhile had strategically bought some of these prep books that I was leaving around the house.
Because we played a win over here in the Marine Corps.
And hoping he would buy into those, He didn't. But we scheduled the SAT, and we took it, and the results come back, and you got to be careful what you wish for. I outscored him, and I had like a 650 or 750 out of 800 on the English side, and he says, "Dad, no one ever gets 750 in English." So that all just came back to haunt me. I beat him on that, but he had a lot of things going for him. He was an Eagle Scout. He lettered in a couple of sports at high school, and he had a good interview with a blue and gold officer, a fellow who kind of recruits for the Naval Academy and around the area. And they got him all over the country.
Probably helps that he knows all those people too. So.
Well, I don't think so, and I didn't know anybody on the admissions board, and it wouldn't have helped if I did. You got in there yourself.
And you ended up being a submariner, though.
Mm-hmm. The Naval Academy, like any selection program, is going to be tough, and there's only a limited number of spots, and there's physical requirements that you have to meet. I don't have 20/20 vision anymore, so probably being a pilot was not in the works for me. So I just went. I think I got selected as a surface warfare officer, and then I didn't necessarily want to do that. I wanted to do something different or more challenging, and so I went and asked to be a submarine officer. And you have to ask to get an interview with the naval reactors personnel, and so I went and saw the captain on the yard, who was the head submarine officer there, and he looked at all my stuff and said, "You picked the wrong major." I was an econ major at the time, and again, probably didn't have the best grades ever, but I was good enough in math and science that he let me through onto the naval reactors interview. So went from there. You got to go still kind of like old school, where you used to have to go interview with Admiral Rickover, and he'd play mind games with you. They keep that tradition alive. You still go interview with the 4-star that's head of naval reactors, but fewer mind games, more just technical interview and then go.
And how many years did you end up doing?
I did 6. I got out in 2012, July of that year, so just a little over 6 years.
Nice. And so, Ike, what are you doing now?
I am what I call fully retired and enjoying it immensely. After my speech pathology career it just kind of petered out. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it's a whole different atmosphere and ball game for allied health professionals than it is on the East Coast, which was okay. But so in 95, I went into selling life insurance and mutual funds, which I enjoyed, but wasn't wildly successful at, but was successful enough to, pay the bills and keep some income coming in. But finally, I ditched that and decided to live a life of leisure, shall we say. But every day is a little bit different. Getting up in the morning is not typical. You got to get braces on and make sure you don't fall out of bed. One of my theories is gravity always wins, and it always does. So everything's just a little bit more difficult, but it's okay. It sure beats being at Arlington, kind of looking up at the sod, which is where I theoretically should be.
Well, we are certainly glad that you didn't end up there. And,
likewise.
And that you ended up here. It's probably a good place to wrap it up. Just awesome to sit and talk with you.
Well, likewise, Jocko.
Did you have any closing thoughts, Matt? Anything that I missed?
I don't have any closing thoughts.
Well, it's just one thought. It's something that we almost always miss in the service, and frankly, in any kind of industry or stuff like that. And that's the part that your spouse plays for you. My wife has been terrific over the last 41 years. She's the love of my life, and B, the mother of my children. And I don't think I could get through a week without her. She helps me. She points out where I'm turning left when I maybe should stay the straight and narrow. She's a good cook. She's pretty good at managing money.
Well,
and I love her dearly.
Well, that's awesome, and yeah, like we can often overlook the families, whether it's the husband, the wife, the kids. They all make a huge sacrifice. But for those that are still in the military, they always make the sacrifice to support their spouse. So absolutely, to the families out there that are out there supporting the spouses, thank you to you all. And sir, it's just been an honor to sit here and talk with you, and
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show. More importantly, though, obviously, thank you for your service and your sacrifice.
Well, and you as well, Jocko, and also you, yes.
Yeah, well, we're waiting on that, Echo.
Everybody serves in their own way.
That's true. There we go. You just got a fist bump from Echo Charles. The sacrifice that you made, the efforts that you made, that's what allows us to be here today as a free people doing what we're doing. So thank you for putting your own safety and your own life on the line for this country, and we deeply appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your service again, and for all those out there who have served and are serving. Get some. Hoorah!
Awesome. Thanks, Ike. Appreciate it.
You bet.
And with that, Charles Robert Ike Eisenbach has left the building, and honored to have him on to talk to, hear his perspective. Kind of a crazy life, starting with growing up in the Philippines.
Yeah, that's fun.
His dad sounded like a character.
Yeah.
A character.
He's like, he's like from the Philippines, right? But not technically Filipino. So, so they say, oh, yeah, you're from the Philippines. It's like not computing. It's good.
Interesting stuff. And it's just awesome for us to sit here and, of course, get to talk with another hero, another individual that just steps up and overcomes. Reminding us, right, that we need to do more, that we can do more. Is there anything, Echo Charles, that you recommend that we should all do?
Yeah.
What is it?
Jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
I think of the many reasons to do jiu-jitsu, I think we've concluded number one is that it's fun.
That should be, however, I don't know if it's the biggest reason. I'm not sure. It's the reason that will keep you with it.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many strong reasons, though.
We'll just say fun/beneficial.
Here's the weird thing. Like on social media, somebody asked me all these different questions, about what would you do if you have trouble controlling your temper? Do jiu-jitsu. What do you do if you have trouble detaching? Or what's a good way to learn to detach? Do jiu-jitsu. What's a good workout to start getting in shape? Jiu-jitsu. What's a good way to let off steam and not get stressed out? Jiu-jitsu. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's just answer. So
yeah,
pretty much across the board, what we are saying, do jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
When you do jiu-jitsu,
you got to have a gi for sure. You're going to need a gi. So when you do gi, this is the gi you're going to get. Origin gi. Now, it's not just one origin gi. Get as many as you want, but you have different selections is what I'm saying. See what I'm saying? So one of the reasons to get an origin gi, not that it's fun. It is fun to get an origin gi, for sure. It is fun to get an origin gi, oddly enough. They're factually the best. Is that how a normal person feels when they shop? Yes. You ever thought, what do they call it? Like some therapy, like shop therapy? Shopping? Or is that what it's called? Shop therapy, yeah. That sounds like what it's called. Or some, no, well, I don't know if but it's that situation where it's like therapeutic to go shopping. Some people just go window shopping. I think have you ever heard me rage against consumerism? Because I'll do it right now. Well, people that buy everything, right? Yeah. I think what happens is there's a certain level of gratification that you get from building something, making something, right? Yeah, yes. Whether it's a brick wall, whether it's hanging drywall in the kitchen, like there's a satisfaction that you get from it, from creating something. Yeah. Well, I hate to say it, but sometimes for some people, shopping starts to kind of replace that. Yeah.
And they want to create something cool. They can just click on Amazon and it's coming, and they kind of get a little dose of it. A little dose of it feels good.
Yes.
So there is that. When you buy an Origin ghee, I will say you feel a little bit. What's better though is when you buy an Origin ghee, what you kind of feel. You look when you buy some random thing off of Amazon.com. You don't know where that thing came from, right? You're not connected to it.
Yes, no, you're not.
When you buy an Origin ghee, you know exactly what's happening. You know exactly where it came from. You know what it means.
It's true.
You know what it represents.
It's true.
You know that it has soul.
So, sure, heck yeah.
So get yourself an Origin ghee.
Well, what you're talking about is completely correct. So I had both. So you're saying making something or doing something,
creating
right?
something,
creating something.
Yes.
So this may or may not count. So I switched some doorknobs in my house.
Big time.
Right? You see what I'm saying? No.
But you got gratification, right?
Yes,
a
exactly
level
right.
of satisfaction. You felt good about it, especially you shut that door. It goes,
yeah,
like, shuts solid.
Yeah. Sure, heck yeah. Well, one of them, the locking thing was like jammed up. It was a thing. It was just giving me issues. Like given.
Did you overcome
the state of my doorknob? That wasn't an acceptable state.
Okay.
It was in my room. Fixing that whole situation was like that
gratifying.
Was something that needed to be done, and I did it by myself. Same thing with a different doorknob. It needed a lock. It didn't have a lock.
Okay.
So there's 3 altogether with different issues. See what I'm saying? But okay, so I did it. Yes.
Universally, you overcame these challenges.
It. Did it. Gratification. But on top of that, I shopped for the new doorknobs on Amazon, and I got gratification from that too.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? But so that fact does remain. But with the ghee, you have the additional gratification. That not, of course, they're the best ghees in the world, but they are made in America.
Imagine that, like, you know, when you're a kid, you want the best car, right?
Yes.
But it's hard to afford that car.
Yeah.
Origin ghee, it's like, oh, you want the best ghee? Cool, you can afford it.
Yeah.
You can make it happen.
Yeah. Or you could go get the not best ghee. Up to you. But I mean, that's on you though.
Yeah.
Let's face it, that's on you.
Well, that's not encouraged behavior.
Oh no, man, come on. Nonetheless, get your ghee. Origin ghee at originmaine.com.
Yeah. And the good thing is, if you need other clothing items outside the realm of jiu-jitsu, outside the realm of ghees, outside the realm of rash guards, then you can get other clothing materials, such as t-shirts, such as hoodies, such as, jeans.
American made denim.
Yeah.
Same deal.
And you might be thinking, well, why stop there? Don't worry, we didn't stop there, because you can get boots too. You can get Origin boots made in America. But you know where the leather's from though?
Where?
Oh, it's from America. You know where the stitching is from though?
Yes.
Yeah, it's from America. But you know where they're actually assembled though, to be honest with you? America. And then there's some supplementation.
Yeah. Yes. The most important kind of supplements, by the way. The ones that work. And, well, in the case of milk, the kind that tastes like dessert. So, yes, that is the best kind of supplements, in my opinion. But joint warfare, krill oil, these are for your joints. Keep you in the game. That's a big deal. Like, doesn't matter how much you can deadlift.
That is the deal.
It's the deal,
Let's
right?
face it, if you're not in the game,
then you're just sort of not in the game.
You're not in the game at all.
Yeah, like, you know how, like, you know, the kind where you're super strong, but, like, your elbows are jamming you up so hard, like, bro, you're not strong anymore because your elbows can't take it. See what I'm saying? So, yeah, joint warfare, krill oil. Also, discipline. That's for your brain. Mm-hmm. Brain and body. It's a brain-body sort of scenario.
Look at you.
That has become an everyday one for me. By the way,
you're on
discipline.
the D.
D-train all day, or wait, D-plane, discipline, plane, the D-plane. Who said that? I think Dave Burke.
Oh, is that really?
Good dude.
Well, he is a good dude.
I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure. Let me confirm that later. But nonetheless, discipline for your brain every day. It helps. Totally does help.
Milk helps every day too, especially when you got that little post dinner. You want a little something.
Sure.
Let's face it. Steak is awesome. Mm-hmm. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But let's just face the facts. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you get done and you got that little craving. Yeah. That little want. Sure. You want something called dessert, but you know it's not part of the plan. You know it's not on the program. Yeah. You know it is not on the path. Certainly.
Yes.
Cake is not on the path. No. But that's okay. We got you. You can have dessert. You get yourself some milk.
Yep. Also for the kids, Warrior Kid Milk. So same deal. Same deal, but more engineered for the kids. Would you say, is that safe to say engineered for the kids? Speaking of engineering for the kids, you know what? I'm not even going to mention it, but there was an not an artifact. Artifact's the wrong word. A product that we sampled at the vitamin shop situation. Are we allowed to talk about this because it might be like against some big reveal plan? You see what I'm saying?
Are you talking about milk bars? It's been revealed.
Oh,
slightly.
okay. All right, there you go. Well, nonetheless, look, that is going to be like another level, another layer of post-dinner dessert situation. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying.
Because
it is a candy bar that's straight up good for you.
Yeah, and
legitimately good for you.
Oh yeah.
Think about that.
Doesn't taste like it.
This is not normal. This is good.
Yeah, it was different than what I was used to for sure. Nonetheless,
you know how many I have of those right now?
How many?
Milk bars. I have 200.
Oh, you grabbed them all. See, that's where they went. See, I was wondering, where did those go? Because I kind of wanted some or whatever.
I never want anything. Like I'm always like, oh no, keep it. No, you can have it. No, because whatever. Right. That's just my my like I don't even want to have the other stuff.
Yeah.
No, they were like, I took them all. I put them all right in my car.
Okay, all right.
So I got all those milk bars.
No, man, you did the right thing.
But yeah, milk bars we're building a plant to make them, by the way, because no one could make what we wanted.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, cool. You can't figure it out? Cool, watch this. Milk bars.
As many milk bars as you need. Anyway, so yes, so milk bars, not currently available, but on the horizon.
On the horizon. Jocko White Tea is available right now.
Yes.
If you need something organic in your life, because you want to feel like one of those people that is,
healthier,
healthier than you are.
Oh yeah.
Now you can come back at them when someone's like, "Is that organic?" Actually, yes, it is. Otherwise, I wouldn't put it in my body.
Certified, yeah. Oh yeah.
Certified organic. What step?
Yeah.
So there you go. And by the way, this stuff is all available at the Vitamin Shop nationwide.
Yeah.
Which is pretty. It's convenient. Bottom line.
Yeah.
And normally that's kind of, I'm a little troubled with convenience, right? Because convenience, all of a sudden, what is there a slippery slope to McDonald's? There's not. No, there's not. Don't let that happen.
Yes, sir. Also, we have a store called Jocko Store. See how I said that? I said we have a store. So Jocko has
we
a store.
do. But it's not just you and me. It's all of us.
The whole group collectively.
Everyone here has a store. Your own store.
Yeah.
Our own store.
Mm-hmm.
We could have called it that. But we didn't think of that back then.
A store.
Could have just,
the people.
Our store. The Trooper store.
Sure.
For people that are just getting after it. Anyways, if they're getting after it, maybe you need a rash guard. Maybe you need a T-shirt. Maybe you need a hat. Mm-hmm. If you're Echo, you don't need a hat because he doesn't wear a hat.
No, very rarely.
I've never seen you with a hat. Not even for 1 second. Yeah. Not even in the cold weather.
No.
I don't think. Wait, maybe I've seen you in an Origin beanie.
I think you've never seen me in cold weather.
True.
Oh, wait, yeah, you have. Utah. That was cold weather. 19 degrees is cold.
Yeah, you must have had a hat on out there.
I don't know if I did or not. Yeah, I had a beanie on. Yeah, you're right.
On.
Nonetheless, JockoStore.com. Yes, represent while you're on the path. That's where you get all this cool stuff. Also, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Mm-hmm. I think it's important. Varying levels of importance, but yeah, do it. Leave a review if you're in the mood.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool thing to do to kind of like just confirm where you're at in your mental space.
Yeah, I think so. Sure.
Don't forget about the Grounded podcast, which is part of the Deafcore Network. You didn't know about that, did you? We got a whole network called the Deafcore Network.
Yeah.
We're building a network.
Sure.
We got 3 podcasts on it. Jocko Podcast, Grounded Podcast, and Warrior Kid Podcast.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to all of them if you want, or none of them. Whatever
you like.
You can also check out Warrior Kid Soap at IrishOaksRanch.com. There's a kid who's been a Warrior Kid since day one in the game. And guess what? He makes his own soap from goat milk, goats that he raised. And we have a new soap. It's called, it's got some active ingredients that help fight against bacteria. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Bacteria, microbials.
Microbes.
Yeah, those funguses.
Yeah, fungi.
Yeah, all these things. Yeah. All these things. All those things need to be defeated. So we have a soap, and it's called Killer Soap. And if you use it, it will help you to Stay clean.
Yep. And also YouTube channel if you're interested in the video version of this podcast or excerpts from the podcast. You don't necessarily want to watch the whole thing all at once, all the time.
Or let's just say you might think that the world would be a better place if, as the world unfolded and things happened, that part of the world exploded or caught on fire. Because Echo, because he has command of virtual reality, he can make my words make things explode. He can make my kettlebell make things blow up.
Yes.
He can make his own magical powers be revealed in forms of like sparks.
If I'm so inclined.
Yeah. So that's Echo Charles. He may not be able to control everything in the world, but on the Jocko YouTube channel, he can make things happen.
Yeah, sure. On video.
He's quite proud of that.
Sure. I haven't used explosions in a while, but we're going to continue that from time to time, I think. I hope.
We also got an album called Psychological Warfare. It's a little psychological hitter if you need a little bump to get you over a bump. You can check that out on iTunes, Google Play, or any MP3. We got FlipsideCanvas.com, where Dakota Meyer is making visual representations of discipline. Pure. Distilled onto a canvas that you can then hang on your wall, and it will keep you on the path. Also got a bunch of books: Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual, Way of the Warrior Kid. Got 3 of those books. Got Mikey and the Dragons for the littler kids. Got the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. The audio version of that is on iTunes and Amazon Music and Google Play as an MP3. We got Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership, the fundamentals of combat leadership that I wrote about with my brother Leif Babin. We have Echelon Front, which is our leadership consultancy, and what we do is we solve problems through leadership. Go to echelonfront.com if you need help in your organization with that. We got EF Online, which is online leadership training to get you up to speed as a leader. Go to efonline.com for that. We've got The Muster, which is our live conference, gathering, seminar. I got to think of a better word because it's better than all those 3 things. Everyone that we've done has sold out. This year, we are doing Orlando, we are doing Phoenix, and we are doing Dallas. If you want to come, go to extremeownership.com. Every one of these that we have done has sold out, and these are going to sell out too, so get there early. And also, if you need leaders at any level in your organization, check out efoverwatch.com for executive leadership. Check out eflegion.com for frontline leadership. These are our platforms to connect the vets that have experience leading with companies that need experienced leaders. Go check out those platforms. Also wanted to say, talking to Ike, asking him about any charities he wanted me to mention, and he said the Semper Fi Fund, which does a bunch of stuff for Marines, for Marine families, for Marines that are transitioning out of the Marine Corps, and also helps them out with their health and wellness. So that's semperfifund.org. And also, he wanted you to check out the Fisher House, which is when troops get wounded and they're in the hospital for an extended period of time. The Fisher House provides them with a place to stay, provides their families with a place to stay in the area. So it's fisherhouse.org. It's both these organizations are great organizations, so check those out. And if you feel like you want to hear more from Echo and I, for whatever reason, if you want to throw a correction at us if we made a mistake, which is entirely possible, we probably need it. Well, we're there. We're all on the interwebs. And we're also on, that means we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and we are on the Frozenbach. And you can find Echo at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. And thanks once again to Charles, Robert, Bob Eisenbach, Ike. An absolute honor to to meet with him today, to talk to him, and to hear his incredible story of service to America and to the rest of the veterans out there that are on active duty. The ones that have already retired, that've left the service. All of you that have put on the uniform, thank you for your service. And of course, the same goes out to our police and law enforcement and firefighters and paramedics and EMTs and dispatchers and correctional officers and Border Patrol and Secret Service. You take care of us here on the home front, and you are appreciated as well. And to both those groups, thanks to your families for the support that you give to the folks that are wearing the uniform. And everyone else out there. You know, when you think about the challenges that you face, that I face, that we all face, what challenges are we up against? What external power is trying to hold you down? Going through your little battle in the world. And then if you can remember someone like Ike. And you can remember what he did facing these challenges. Shot in the head, wounded, paralyzed, hospitalized. And you know what? Any one of us can fold under those challenges of life. You can do that. You can fold. You can give in. Or you can do what Ike did. And what Ike does every day, which is take on those challenges by getting out there and getting after it. So, until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.